welcome. I am Chilling Tales, and as you get ready for bed, you must know that you are doing amazing and you deserve all the sleep you can get. So, as you are winding down, let me know where you are from and what time you are watching this video. Like and subscribe to help the channel if you'd like. Now put your mind at ease and let the story unfold. The last time the moon showed its face in our valley, I was 12 and didn't know what it meant to count your breaths. Back then, the mountain wore a winter cap of cloud, and the town street lamps painted a respectable circle on the cobbles. And if a dog barked after midnight, the sound ran along fences like a rumor, then faded. The moon came up silver and whole, and the old men stopped their cards and the old women stopped their knitting, and everyone looked up as if something had entered the room without knocking. It was a good harvest year. It was before the flood, before the mill burned, before we learned to measure nights by what didn't happen. After that, we didn't see the moon again. Not once, not for 19 years. We spoke around it the way a family talks around a bad father. Weather forecasts said overcast. So many times it became the shape of a week. The nightly news showed satellites and low-pressure systems, like children lifting a bedsheet to prove there is nothing under it. People who moved here learned quickly not to mention the sky. Tourists tried to film the mountain halo and learned quickly their batteries died on that ridge, and their files corrupted with a soft, bubbly noise like water boiling over a low flame. We grew used to it, the way you live with a limp. We put better bulbs in streetlights, then gave up when they buzzed themselves to death. We replaced curtains with heavier cloth. Mothers told babies stories about old moons that lived in picture books with glitter, and toddlers pressed their hands on the foil and whispered like praying. The rest of us pretended not to notice the way calendars made us tired. I work nights. I don't need to say what kind, just enough to keep cash in a jar and lights on in a house that deserved better. The job suits people who don't mind being invisible. Sometimes I think invisibility is the only honest thing we have left. On the 19th anniversary of the last moon, I took the long road home from the edge of town because the short one had a police car, and I am too old to watch anyone explain themselves. It was 2 in the morning. The wind smelled like a change that hadn't decided what to be. The mountain's snowcap glowed a dull, reliable gray. I counted my steps from the turnoff to the footbridge because the boards there have a way of remembering names. 37 steps, 38, 39. At 40, the world brightened, not like dawn. Dawn is patient, a soft hand on the back of your neck. This was the light in an empty theater when the house manager hits the wrong switch. The river took a breath like a surprised animal. My mouth dried. I looked up because everyone looks up, even people who swear they won't. The clouds were thinning, not breaking. Thinning, as if someone had pressed their thumb into the wool and left a shallow bowl. A pale coin showed through. It wasn't much, enough to throw shadows where there hadn't been any, enough to make the footbridge planks admit they were wood and not simply floor, enough to make the hair rise on my arms in a way that remembered being 12. Dogs woke across town, not the sharp alert bark, the low note dogs use when they smell a visitor they recognize and don't like to remember. On the far side of the bridge, the old radio smith's windows filled with light, although he's been dead 3 winters, and his son never learned tubes. Somewhere a set of wind chimes remembered that it was built to sound like glass, not tin. I wanted to go home. I wanted to call my mother, and I wanted to stand in the street like a fool, and I wanted to walk into the river and let it decide. Instead, I did what people do when they are afraid. They are part of a story. I kept going the way I had planned and tried to make my feet uninterested. The first scream came from the direction of the mill ruins, not a movie scream. The sound someone makes when they see a memory coming toward them with teeth. Then another, behind the church. Then the kind of silence that visits a room where everyone is listening for the same thing at once. I cut through the grocer's lot, and the grocer, who keeps a bat by the freezer for rats, stood with it on his shoulder and didn't seem to know what it was. "Do you see it?" he asked, like we were boys daring each other to climb the water tower. "It's just a moon," I said, and the word just was the lie, and we both heard it. The clouds thinned more, the coin became a face, the face became an eye, the light sharpened, the street glowed in dull stripes where gravel decided to be individual stones again. The grocer's bat had a small notch near the handle, and I knew suddenly it came from the night last summer when he missed and hit the shelf and pretended he meant to. This is what moonlight does when it's been gone too long. It tells you the truth about surfaces. We didn't talk about what else it tells. On Ash Lane, a boy named Felix had his first kiss against the lip of the old quarry, and he did not know that the person kissing him had carried a knife there for other reasons. In the cemetery, Mrs. Velez counted names in the row where her husband would have one someday, and the light hit a certain letter, and she put her hand over her mouth as if she had interrupted a conversation. At the bend where the road swings past the basswood, someone I will not name pulled a car into the ditch and stayed there, gripping the wheel as if it could make him smaller. And me? I got home to a house I rent from a woman who believes in cash only and saints who like tea. The moonlight reached the stoop and decided the door needed washing. Inside, the light fell on my kitchen table, and everything I'd done there that shouldn't be seen stood up and said its own name. I shut the curtains. The light was thinner through fabric, but it was the kind of thin that makes you feel dishonest. I turned on the stovetop fan to mix the air and boiled water that didn't need to boil, and stood with my palms on the counter until the sound of the fan matched my breathing. A soft noise came from the back of the house, and I told the old pipes to go to hell, and then I told myself the old pipes had every right to be, just like the rest of us. It wasn't the pipes, it was my neighbor knocking on my back door. She's a nurse and sleeps when she can, and her hair in a moonlit window makes her look like her mother, which is a complicated kindness. She pressed her forehead to the glass and said, without preamble, "They're calling out the names." "Whose?" I asked, though I knew. "Anyone's. Everyone's. This is Res." She gestured at the sky, then at herself, as if she had forgotten which of us was larger. "You can hear it if you stand in the hall where the stairs used to be. They're saying them like the way the priest reads a list when he's irritated with it. Fast but careful. I went with her because people do. The hallway in her house remembers a second set of stairs the previous owner ripped out to make a long closet, and sometimes if you step exactly where the fourth stair would be, your ankle decides to fold. We stood there shoulder to shoulder and listened to names fall through the ceiling like slow rain. My name was there. So was hers. So was my mother's maiden name, which the town never uses. So was the grocer's dead father. So was a girl none of us had seen since she cut her hair and left before breakfast 13 years ago. We whispered yes when we recognized one, like librarians alone in the stacks. Eventually the list looped, and it was worse hearing it the second time, because then you knew who you were waiting for. The nurse squeezed my hand. "Do you smell it?" "What? Metal?" I did, not like blood, like coins in a new fist. We aren't idiots. We have always known what hides in stories that mention moons and names and lists. It is one thing to know, it is another to live it. There are rules. Every culture that has mouthed this fear has come up with a different apron to put on it, but the body is the same underneath. Do not run. Do not look over your shoulder, but do track with your ears the way a deer tracks wind. If you can, get to iron. If you can't, get to a door frame. The first person you see is not the person you knew. The second one might be. Do not say your name if someone asks. Do not answer a voice that says your name in the tone your mother used when she was tired. If you must cut, cut clean. If you cannot cut, climb. If you cannot climb, curl into yourself and think of water and think of dawn. All of this is good advice. All of it is the kind of advice that deserts you when you need it most. From the street came the sound of someone crossing on four limbs because two didn't seem sufficient. A trash can went over. The lid rolled with comic obedience to physics. A laugh followed, too close to words, not joy, not mockery. Testing. You've heard people make that sound when they've had just enough to drink to think about fighting. The long vowel where they decide. The nurse went to the front room, and I followed. She's the kind of person who stands in doorways and makes a shape the room can use. The moonlight filled the street, not evenly, but in pools where it found spots to gather. In one of those pools, Mr. Kozak from the barber shop crouched with both hands on the ground as if the earth were a new instrument. His ears were wrong. He had never been a beautiful man. The moon was not interested in making him one. His eyes had a distance in them that could be confused for thought if you wanted to be kind. His breath was a careful machine. He smelled the air as if it contained instructions. I whispered his name because I am that kind of fool. He turned his head slowly toward the window and did not see us at first because the moon caught itself in the glass and told lies. Then he saw me. When an animal recognizes you, it does not blink. He did not blink. He moved toward the door, not quickly. The nurse put her hand flat against my chest and pushed me back 2 steps. She lifted a chair and set it under the knob the way people do in movies. The chair slid on polished wood and sighed. Something on the back porch muttered in the voice of her long-dead brother for exactly 3 words, "Let me in," and then went quiet as if embarrassed. She put both hands on the door and said no in a voice she uses for certain family members, and the door remembered being a tree. From up the street, someone ran. Running is a rhythm, and rhythms are roads. The not quite Mr. Kozak's head snapped toward the sound, and he moved faster than a man his age, with his bad knee should move. Somewhere a bottle broke, singing itself as it went. Somewhere a woman said God in a tone that could get her into any heaven. We waited. Waiting is the only thing a house requires from you when the night is deciding. The nurse and I sat with our backs to the wall and counted steps when we heard them and counted breaths when we didn't. I thought of dumb things, the route the mailman takes on Thursdays, the price of onions, the way my mother used to tap the table twice when she wanted me to stop but couldn't say it in front of company. Outside, the list of names had stopped. The house creaked as if it were trying to turn in bed without waking its spouse. The moon climbed, and the light became the aggressive white of a bathroom bulb in a cheap motel. I heard the river change its mind about what direction was down. The mountain murmured in its sleep like a plumber on his back under a sink. A hand tapped politely on the glass behind us. I didn't jump. You only jump the first 10 times in a life. I turned my head very slowly and found my own face looking back at me from the window pane, ghosted by lamplight. For a second, dumb animal hope rose. Someone else, the old stories, a warning. Then my reflection breathed in time with me, and I hated it the way you hate someone who looks too much like a stranger when you catch them in the mirror at 2 in the morning. The nurse's phone buzzed in her pocket. She didn't check it. We both knew the battery would show 1%, no matter what it had been a minute ago, and any text we saw would be either a decade late or a few hours early. The first time the moon came back, someone answered a ringing landline and spoke to his mother 2 years dead. He said it was a recording, but couldn't find it again after the night passed. The second time, Ms. O'Hara opened her email and watched new messages sort themselves by age, like a deck of cards with names she had forgotten she'd lost. The third time, a radio station started carrying a baseball game from the year we still had a team. You learn what to pick up and what to let ring. When the howl came, it came from behind the grocer's. It wasn't a wolf's. It was a voice stripped of words. the sound of a person at the exact age where rage is a coat that fits, men who hadn't stood since the plant closed, stood, women who hadn't put their hair up since the last wedding put their hair up, old people bowed their heads, children who'd been born in the dark turned their faces to the light as if something had reached through skin and tugged. The nurse said very softly, "If you have to do it, you do it clean." "I know," I said, and discovered that I did. We didn't go out, other people did. It is hard to write the night because it wrote us. I saw figures cross the street fast enough to leave a second figure behind them, made of light. I saw a shadow detach from a fence and decide it had been wrong about the fence, then return to it with relief. I saw two shapes grapple in the alley like a tangled conversation and then step apart, and one of them wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, and the other smoothed her dress, and they both walked away, and in the morning neither would remember whose house they came from. I slept sitting up, head against the wall, neck at an angle that would punish me all week. I woke to quiet that pretended to be ordinary. The light had softened. The moon had gone behind its old curtain, as if it hadn't been in the room at all. In the street, someone had dragged a hose to the gutter, and the water came out pink and then clear. The nurse made coffee stronger than it needed to be because she likes to test her heart. We went out together, and the town did the thing towns do after disasters. We decided what the story was going to be. The grocer boarded a door that had lost interest in hinges. Mr. Kozak swept his stoop and did not, for the rest of his life, touch his ears in public. The parish ladies collected the names of those who hadn't come home and wrote them on index cards and stacked them with rubber bands in a drawer no one else uses. I walked down to the bridge with a bucket and threw water over the places where footprints looked more like paws than feet, and told myself I was trying to keep the smell down. When someone asked about the list of names from the hall where the stairs used to be, the nurse said radio interference, and the person who asked accepted it because people who live in valleys learn what to blame. That night, the clouds were obedient again. The mountain put its hat back on. Dogs slept like they'd done a job. The river went the way it always goes. We all pretended to be relieved, but relief is a muscle, and if you use it too much, it shakes. 2 weeks later, the light rose again, not as bright. The coin kept its thumbprint. The list began sooner, in another part of the house, this time in the gap where the dumbwaiter once ran. Different order, different names at the top, same careful tone. We didn't wait for the howl. We didn't need to. The town was ready in a way that makes you proud and sick. You want me to tell you it was wolves, that it was a man, that it was mass hysteria, that the mountain houses a frequency that rattles fillings and makes people do religious things and bite. I can't. All I can tell you is what it felt like to live inside a town that keeps itself small on purpose and then watches something bigger put its hand over us and ask us to breathe with it. I can tell you what it is to walk on all fours because the ground has learned your name and wants to hear it the slow way. I can tell you that some people came back with scratches they couldn't place, and some came back with debts they refused to pay, and some didn't come back, and we folded their names into drawers and told the children different stories about where doors lead at night. And me, the third night the moon returned, I went to the bridge early and sat in the shadow where it couldn't find me. A shape joined me there. Not a man, not anything you could elect or arrest. A presence like a posture you remember from someone you loved. It didn't speak. It didn't need to. It smelled like coins and pine pitch and the inside of a new barrel. It pressed warmth into the air like an animal that had lived too long outside and remembered blankets. It leaned its weight against the post, and I leaned mine back the way you lean against a friend when there's only one bench. When it was over, I went home with blood under my nails and a voice in my throat that would not be mine for a while, and a name in my ear that I will not write. I washed my hands. I slept. I woke. The nurse knocked at the back door and handed me a cup and did not ask. We sat in the kitchen while the fan tried hard and failed to drown out the memory of light, and we decided what words we would use if anyone asked, and we decided that if anyone asked too, well, we would move, and we decided that moving is only a different kind of staying. Since then, the calendar doesn't make sense. The moon comes when it wants, a thin glance at a bus stop, a bright slap at the river, a sudden coin above the grocery when the delivery truck's back is open, and the cases of tomatoes shine like somebody's idea of a heart. We are not surprised anymore. We are careful in pairs. We keep iron where it makes sense, and sometimes where it doesn't. We speak our names aloud at noon, so they are heavy enough to hold at night. We keep a list of who should not be met on the street after midnight when the light is white, and we keep a list of who should be walked home, even if they say they don't need it. On bad nights, the list of names comes from the hall where the stairs used to be, and from the dumbwaiter shaft, and from the crack in the cellar wall that lets in a thread of river smell, and from the mouth of the stove, and from the back of my own teeth. I put my hand on the table and count to 40 and don't get up. On good nights, the clouds are stubborn and the dogs snore, and I make soup with onions for the smell, and the nurse sits with me, and we play cards, and we both look at the window at the same time, for no reason at all, and are pleased when the glass is only glass. Sometimes I go back to the footbridge at 12 and try to remember what it was to be a child in a night with a proper moon, the kind that made raccoons look like thieves and made my mother say curtains, please, with a smile. I know better now. The moon is not for us. It is not against us. It is a door that opens when it wants, and we, foolish animals, step through because stepping is what we do. There are teeth on both sides. There is also the kind of kindness that doesn't say its name. If you ever come through our valley and ask about the sky, we will shrug and say weather. If you stay a night and hear your name from the hall where the stairs used to be, don't answer. If you must look, look down. If you must run, run like you're late for something ordinary. Milk, bread, the first 10 minutes of a movie, and if the light finds you and puts its hand on the back of your neck and says breathe, do it. Breathe. Count to 40. Put your palm on a table and tell it you are here and you plan to stay. And the table, which was a tree once and knows about light, will steady you until the coin goes back in its cloud pocket and the world pretends to sleep. We will be here in the morning, buying onions, nodding at the nurse, making small talk. We will not mention the ears. We will set a bowl outside our doors, just in case. We will do all the things people do in towns that last, stand in doorways, walk each other home, cut clean when we have to, learn not to answer to the wrong tone of our own names. And when the moon decides it has been gone long enough again, we will look up, because we cannot help it, because it's what the body does when someone enters a room without knocking. We will not be ready. We will be as ready as anyone can be. We will hold the door frames and fold our tongues over our teeth and wait for the list to begin. Now on to the next story. The sign above the door still said WRX 1310 AM, but the bulbs behind the letters were half dead, so most nights it read something closer to WRX. The X felt appropriate. It sounded like a kiss and a warning, and the shape a map uses when it wants you to turn around. I took the night shift for the same reason people take night shifts in places like this, because no one else wanted it, and because the money wasn't good enough to be anyone's first choice. The station sits where the city gets thin and the river fattens up. Old warehouses with their windows bricked in, a handful of tire shops, a diner with a neon coffee cup whose steam pulses in slow red breaths. When the sun is up, the whole block smells like hot rubber and old oil. When the sun's down, it smells like a motel room that forgot who stayed there last. Board op, voice, light maintenance, The station manager told me. Her office had 2 desks, one for payroll and one for the cat. The cat chose mine. Midnight to 6. Keep the logs clean. The tower hums in a big storm. Don't panic. We've got a generator, but the switch is sticky. Kick it. Any callers? I asked because I was not a child and knew what dead stations feel like in the bones. You'll get some, she said. Old people who forget to sleep. Third shift nurses, the man who makes breakfast for snowplow crews when it snows. They'll keep you company. And requests? She smirked like a lint roller. Darling, you don't have the licenses for much of that anymore. But sure, if they ask for Patsy Cline, slide on a cover so the big boys don't bite. Talk a lot, it's cheap. Rocks used to be a local legend. Before my time, and my father's barely. A baritone with a tasteful mustache kept half the valley alive through layoffs and ice storms. The station's photo wall still held his framed headshot. Part newsman, part Friday night dad. Then the company in another state bought the licenses and split the day in leases. Syndicated chatter, daytime sports, religious hour with a preacher whose voice sounded like a shoe polishing itself. Night was junk shop time. Night was me. The booth was small, God's own aquarium, if God had bad tastes. Brown carpet, foam squares on the wall gone the color of tea. A console older than my first crush, the board patched with tape where mic 1 used to be, and where phone sometimes pretended. A window looked into the bullpen that no shows used anymore. Beyond that, a hallway with framed black and white photos from the station's good years, and a door that stuck in humidity. A sign over the hallway switch, "Do not turn off the red light, under any circumstances." The red light hung over the outside door like a drunk moon and burned whenever we broadcast. It meant on air to anyone who knew. It meant something else to me by the second week. I started the way you start in a haunted house, by pretending you're the one doing the haunting. "Good midnight, Valley," I said, my voice lower than it is in my human life. "You're up late with rocks, caffeinate me if you can. Keep me awake if you can't. Nurses, write me. Drivers, honk in a beautiful key when you pass a red light swinging over a tired door." People called. Her name was Dee Dee. She worked laundry at Mercy and wanted something with a backbeat to keep her legs moving. A man I assumed was divorced because of how carefully he didn't mention anyone. Asked for an old love song and then said, "Never mind, I shouldn't." A woman who wouldn't give a name just breathed for a minute and said, "Finally, he's asleep. Can you just talk to me until I'm sure?" I talked. The night talked back. The tower hummed. The first time the phone rang without ringing, I figured the line was dirty. You know the sound old wires make when they realize there is no longer enough world on the other side to carry them properly? That quick, soft chirp like a bird practiced into silence? It did that. The light didn't blink, but the line was there. I punched it because silence is harder to sell than even a bad voice, and said, "Good midnight. Warox?" A woman breathed. She had the careful cadence of a person who practiced being calm when she didn't want to be. It sounded like she was in a closet without room to kneel. "Is it you tonight?" she asked. "Depends," I said, my hand hovering over the pot fader because I am not a fool. "Who am I supposed to be?" "The one in the glass," she said. "You're new." "Newish," I said, and in the window my face looked like someone I hadn't met yet. "I like the way you keep the levels even," she said. "The last one let the songs hurt. They hurt anyway, you know. You don't have to help." I told her my name, and she took it and rolled it around like a lozenge. "I need you to stay on," she said. "Urgent now. All the way to 6. Don't play whatever he asks you to. He'll call. He always calls when the red light is clean." "The preacher?" I asked, trying a joke to keep my lungs from weeping in public. "No," she said softly. "The other one." A click. The line didn't hang up. It ended, like a half-remembered dream when the cat jumps on your chest. The red light over the back door flickered once. The tower's hum deepened a half-step, as if the weather had decided to harmonize. At 1:17 a.m., the real ring came, BRRNN, like a small bell inside a cereal box. I punched the line and hit the delay because I am a little bit trained. Good midnight, WRX. Static. Then a man's voice, new and old, the way a song sounds when someone presses a warble button. You're late. Actually on time, I said, glancing at the atomic clock the manager had taped to the wall, with the seriousness of a room where the minute hand used to matter. You're early, he laughed. I have heard lovely laughs in my life, and awful ones, and the ones that sound like someone trying on a laugh to see if it fits. This one had a seam. It sounded like a thing once broken and recently set. Play me something, he said, something with an engine in it. Specific. I scrolled through the library. The legal stuff was thin, the gray stuff was deep. Recordings of local bands that signed away rights for a joke. Tracks from a basement cover act who gave us 3 CDs of Springsteen-ish that wasn't, backups we didn't deserve to have. My hand hovered over a track titled 3-Lane Mercy and then dragged itself to a stack of PSAs instead. The man hummed behind the static. The red light brightened. I can talk to you, I said brightly. I can keep you awake. I don't sleep, he said without brag. I prefer to drive. We love a driver. I flicked all the faders to make noises come and go, because a board in motion is almost music. What kind of road? Empty, wet, no signs. Ha, I said nervously. Our valley. The DOT is going to call me if you keep slandering them. He chuckled again. The chuckle had teeth. A song, he said, bored now. You'll learn I don't call twice. Am I learning? I asked to cut the fear in two. What is this, training? Apprenticeship, he agreed, but you don't like that word. A click, not a hang-up. The feeling a night gets when someone leaves the building without opening a door. When I stood at the glass and looked past my face, the bullpen was empty as it had been all night. A chair had shifted slightly, as if someone had gotten up in a hurry to make a point. I put on a weather bed and read the hour pronounced precipitation like it was a guest, added a joke about how no one needs a forecast if they have joints with opinions. Did the thing voices do, or they turn fear into filler? I told myself the delay meant I could stop anything before it slid into the room. I told myself the red light was a kind of spell, a circle the station had drawn for 50 years to convince the dark that it should listen and not eat. At 1:23, the phone chirped without the light again. I hit it. Wah rocks. Don't, the woman said. He makes you talk, and then he makes you play it back to him later, and takes the part he needs. What part? I asked. The part that thinks nothing bad can happen if you keep talking, she said. I have to go. I'm in the broom closet, and Mrs. Owens just came in for more toilet paper. Click. Who are you? I asked an empty line. The red light hummed. The tower responded, like a bridge under too many feet. By 2 a.m., my voice had learned how to put itself in a lower place and stay there. The script in front of me turned to scribbles, the scribbles to words no one wrote. I read copy for a farm implement dealer who had moved his lot 5 years ago and had a name like a man who used to give kids cigars. I read a PSA about a county fair that had burned down before I was born. I read the top of the hour legal ID in a cadence I'd never practiced. This is WRX 1310 AM, bringing you the night the way you ask for it. It felt like reading an oath. At 2:36, the on-air red light outside blinked. One blink. All our gear is old, the manager had said. It drinks power like a teenager, but that blink had timing. It happened exactly when I turned down the bed and left space for a breath. Outside, down the hallway, the door latch sighed, then decided against it. You learn a building's noises fast. Which ones are the compressor, the ice machine trying its best, the raccoon overhead deciding whether to move in, Which ones are the ones that come from inside your head? Hunger noises, exhaustion scraping. The sigh at the latch was neither. It was the sound a door makes when a polite person pretends to knock just by leaning close. The tower hummed the way a person hums to make you forget they have a mouth. I put a CD in and hit play on a jazz thing we did have the paper for because dead men's catalogs are bigger. 2:03, I said, stupidly, to the air. If you're crossing the viaduct, watch the black ice near the fourth seam. Yes, the fourth, and don't pretend you don't know what I mean. The chirp. No light. Once, the woman said. Just once, I answered. When he asked my name, he said it back to me like he was making sure it fit. He called me by that name for 50 minutes until the red light went out with the dawn, and then he didn't know me anymore. Please don't say your name again. I have to, I said automatically. It's the law. Not to him, she said, and suddenly she was on two lines at once, her voice in the phone and her breath in the window glass. The booth filled with a smell like cold rain on turned dirt. If you feel the need to explain yourself, you are already doing what he wants. Click. I filled between songs like a fireman's arm. The board seemed to know my hand. The little start buttons glowed warm as if my fingers were their plan. My throat went dry, and I drank coffee that had been made in the last administration. My pulse learned the routes of each ad break as if the console had laid them in as paths for animals. At 3, I swore I heard the baritone from the old station Headshot chuckle from the hallway, a friendly sound with one extra tooth in it. PSA from the library, I said, queuing up a recording from whatever era WROX had money for a library. Story hour Saturdays 11 to noon, no unattended children, a reasonable request. The child in the recording laughed on cue, too high, the laugh elongated like tape left on a radiator. The red light outside burned brighter. Call in and tell me about the best, worst road you ever drove, I said, panicking toward Small, because people call up the perfect roads, and those are never true. The chirp again. What's your best, worst road? I asked, ready to hang up if laughter came with seams. County 12, a male voice said, flat, before they fixed the shoulder. Ah, I said, because that road eats cars when it has nothing better to do. The place where the crossbuck leans because there's absolutely a train and absolutely no track. Right, he said, and then the voice changed. He said my name, the way a parent does when they're about to ask you to get in the car, because the hospital is where you need to be. Play me something with drums. No, I said, before the part of my brain that does social grease could step in. We've got no license for anything except a sad version of Take 5. Play me the Not Quite, he said, and the radio's delay light flared and died as if the thing in between me and the air decided it could get there quicker, another way. I put on the PSA again. Remember, I said, my mouth speaking while the rest of me went still. We don't exist without you. If you're drunk, don't drive. If you're lonely, call me. If you're tired, pull over at the diner with the neon cup and tell them WR Oaks sent you. They'll give you a refill. Tell them I sent you. The man on the line said in my head, not in my ears, and the red light outside fluttered like breath on glass. I am not brave. I am not a hero in the way stories like to sell hero. I did not recite scripture or salt the threshold. I did what night shift people do. I chose the next small thing I could do and did it stubbornly until it looked like courage. I slid a CD into the disc tray and played 2 minutes of Rain because the station had a local artist who had recorded City at Night with a hand mic and a roof. Then I brought my own mic up and told a story about a night the automatic car wash downtown ate my mother's bumper and the manager apologized with a voucher booklet, so fat we washed a car we didn't even own yet. The console's lights looked like a quiet Christmas. The tower hummed to itself, and the hum felt like a dog deciding to lie back down after it has already stood up. At 3:45, the door opened. Not the back door, the hallway door, the one I had deadbolted and chain locked out of habit. I heard the chain go tight and stay that way. The door moved about half an inch into the room and held there, polite, while the chain chose its side in a conversation I wasn't invited to. The red light flickered and didn't fail. I tasted pennies. I didn't turn to look. I learned that from an old man in a different city who used to sit up with dying people and said turning towards certain doors makes them wider. I told a different story, this one about a gas station night clerk who used to let me count his packs of Marlboros when I was 9, and he wasn't supposed to let kids in the booth, and he did anyway, and taught me change, which is kindness, no matter what the world says it is. The door eased back and closed. The chain sighed, as if it had been complimented on its figure. It's harder when they're polite, I said into a microphone no one had asked a question into. At 4, the woman called again. It was the real ring this time. You're doing well, she said. He's bored. He's in a car with the windows cracked and the heater making sounds. He wants to drive through the city and listen to the station bleed into another. He wants to catch you as you ghost out. Her breath warmed the glass. Frost formed where she said my name without saying it. Don't say you'll keep him company. I won't, I said. I'll keep other people company, and he can listen to that. Better, she said. Tell them something they can hold on to when the red light goes out. So you're real, I said, because no one should trust untested angels. Not exactly, she said. I'm one of the things that happens when people need to talk into the dark, and the dark needs someone to talk through. We organize ourselves after a while. We hold our own hands. Are you dead? I asked, which is a rude question, and the only one I had strength to carry. I am on the side of the glass that doesn't fog, she said, which is not the same. Why do you care? I asked. Why me? Because your voice is tidy, she said. Tidy, I repeated, offended. It has corners, she said. Things with corners can keep the rain off people. Sometimes you keep the rain off things that do not deserve it. Her tone cooled. You will never play him what he asks for, even when he makes you want to. Promise. I promise, I said, and the room breathed the small sigh of a contract signed. By 5, it felt like the booth and I had become one instrument. The board sliders were a spine. I scratched a note, and the station changed shape. I lied, and the ceiling dipped. I told the truth, and something in the tower straightened. I told listeners about the diner's pot of coffee and about a deer in the median near mile marker 124 that had no interest in learning economics, and about a snowplow driver pulling in behind a school at 5 because a school should look like a promise even when the county's broke. Call me when you get to the light by the pharmacy, I told a nurse from Mercy. There's something about the 6th light on that pole that makes people cry. I'm not saying it will, I'm saying it might. So if it does, you'll know you can blame something that can't be hurt. At 5:30, the storm the station manager had promised rolled its shoulders over the river. The tower hummed in the exact note the red light liked. The generator clicked its tongue at me in the back hall, and I went and kicked it, and it breathed on the 3rd kick. I could feel the man out there in the dark, drowsy with ask, getting nearer because boredom leads men to doors. He didn't knock this time. He waited for the station to ghost out at the top of the hour so he could slip between shows like a teethy eel. I did something the manager would have fired me for if we had this conversation in the morning. At 5:56, I turned off the automation. I killed the next show's stinger. I turned off the legal ID bed. I left the red light burning and the mic up. We don't have anything scheduled. I told the valley we've just got 4 minutes and a room and a sound. I could make a sound, the man said, without calling, without breathing, from a distance that felt too near. You won't, I told him, and then I spoke the only prayer I know that works. Inventory. I told the night what was in my pockets. Keys, too. Receipt for a coffee whose ink had decided not to be useful anymore. A coin from a foreign country I had never visited. A paperclip. Lint. A dried bean. I told the night what was on the board: one dead channel where Mic 3 used to be, one half-alive phone, a CD with a play button that had never failed me. I told the night my full name, first, middle, last, not into the phone or to the man, but to the people in their cars, to the nurse on the verge of the pole that weeps people, to the snowplow driver, to the old man walking his apartment, because every step is a decision and the floor is a map. I told them my name so that later, if the man called and asked, I could say you missed it. I gave it to someone else. At 5:59:30, I said Wallach's 13:10 a.m. We are still here. At 6:1 the red light went out, not a blink, off. The hum of the tower changed to the low, uninteresting tone of proper business hours. I could feel the man's mouth make a shape of an annoyed smile. The chain on the door lifted itself slightly off the jamb, as if to say, "We'll try again tonight." The coffee at the diner across the street pulsed once in its urn and then settled, like a body breathing in sleep. I didn't move. The cat stepped into the booth and rubbed against my shin as if she had come to collect something I had promised. I felt the shape of the night in my throat, how much I had fed it, and how much it had tried to take when I was distracted. The phone didn't ring. The delay light lay like a dead eye. The board looked like a cemetery before the gravedigger comes to mind. The flowers. At 6:07, the station manager opened the though-locked hallway door with a trick I had not known existed and said, "You look like someone who almost quit." "Almost," I said. "What's the red light for?" She didn't pretend not to know what I meant. "It's a promise," she said. "We keep it when we can." "Who was the last one?" I asked. "The last night voice." She sighed. "You'll see his picture on the wall with the mustache," she said gently. We found him asleep at the board with a song on loop and a ring mark from his coffee, and a smile like a person hearing applause in another room. "Dead?" I asked, as if dead were worse than what else I could imagine. "Rested?" she said. "Anyway, don't worry. The red light doesn't ask you for anything you don't already want to give." Which is the only kind of lie that works. I went home and slept through the day, and woke to a voicemail from the nurse, who cried at the sixth light. She said, "You kept me company. The deer was there. I think you saved his life too." Which is funny because I don't think deer have radio. The man didn't call. He doesn't need phones the way we do. He reads schedules. He listens for silence, the way men like me listen for footsteps in hallways. I took the night shift again and again and again, because it turns out I like talking to the valley when it pretends not to listen. It turns out I like being the circle a red light draws. It turns out I like learning the difference between a door being polite and a door being brave. The woman called sometimes not to say anything except keep the levels even, and once to ask if you feel something standing behind you, and it is tall and careful, don't turn, not yet. Give it a small story to hold, something with corners. I do. I tell the towers and the men in cars and the nurses and the tired and the dead and not of the valley, small stories with corners. I do not play him the songs he asks for. I play him rain sometimes because rain makes him quiet. I list what is in my pockets. I tell people my name at the top of the hour, where it belongs, so I won't be tempted to squander it later. I keep the red light burning until 6, even when storms kick it and the generator needs 3 kicks back. If you are driving at 1:17 a.m. and you hear a voice that makes you think of dark roads without signs, don't ask him to keep you company. Ask me. If you are in a closet behind a mop and a bucket, call from there. I will listen, and the red light will keep itself brave a little longer. If you have to pull over at the 6th light to cry for no reason, you can write down. Do it. I'll tell you the names of the things in my pockets until you are done. If you are tired, I will list the bridges and the roads that pretend to be straight and warn you about the deer who don't like economics. If a song with an engine keeps catching your ear, hum it, but don't let me hear you. He listens for that. He is always on the line that doesn't blink. When the dawn takes the red light, and I tell the valley the call sign and my full name, and say we are still here, know that I am saying it to the glass too. I am saying it to the door that breathes. I am saying it to the old mustache on the wall, and the cat, and the woman who lives on the breath side of the window, and to the tower that sings when it rains. We are still here. For now. Now, on to the next story. The first time I heard the station call a stop that doesn't exist, I thought I was mishearing my own voice. The graveyard shift in central control isn't glamorous. It's a room that smells like warm plastic and old coffee, half lit so the wall of monitors wears the city like a dim aquarium. I sit under a map that pulses with tiny lights, trains as fireflies, power blocks as bones. Between midnight and 5, it's mostly ballast, a few last runs rattling home, a lot of empty track, and in between the city's heartbeat, learning to keep quiet. Next stop, Marrow Street. Doors open on the left. I had just finished the 0210 slate of automated announcements. Delay on the blue. Elevator out at East Market. Mind the gap if you still believe in poetry. My finger hovered over the console touchpad, the way it does when you're done with a thing, but not ready to admit it. The speakers that run our internal feed murmured with the uninteresting sounds of a station at night. Hum, draft, a distant cough. Then that, my voice saying a name I've never recorded, for a stop our map has never carried. I pulled up the list of all scheduled stations, as if software could argue with what my ears had just taken in. The list is tidy. We have the stations we have. The ghosts live in the hallways, not in the database. A camera at platform 2 of Kingfisher flickered. The platform was empty, except for a man whose jacket made him look like a plastic bag caught on a fence. He turned toward the lens with the recognition of people who know cameras better than faces. The glass behind him showed his reflection, then something else, then only the tiled black. Next stop, Marrow Street, my voice said again, softer, as if a door had been closed between us. I unmuted the ops line. The dispatcher on duty yawned so hard we both felt it. You hear that? I asked. Hear what? The room's vents answered, because vents always choose the wrong time to grow opinionated. I listened for my phantom again and got only the live feed from a blue line car, a lone pair of shoes on gray vinyl, 2 ad posters pretending to be cheerful, the driver's cab door shut and properly latched. It's nothing, I said, and the dispatcher grunted in the language of people who love nothing. Later, at 3, a maintenance crew keyed up on the radio to say they were clear of the track by the old river tunnel. Someone made a joke about eels, someone else about urban legends. Laughter sounded like wrenches politely clinking. I signed them out of the block and watched the little rectangle on my map change color, safe again. I noted the time in my log and the steady handwriting I learned after. I practiced being tidy because it gave me a way to survive what I couldn't control. At 3:17, a train icon butted at the edge of the map in a place no train should ever bud. We're not an old city, not in the European sense, but we've dug enough holes to pretend. There are tunnels we don't use. Some got flooded, some got walled off when the new line's curve didn't agree with the old. There are rooms under stations that appear on the original schematics as storage, and whose keys we don't carry anymore. There are tracks laid for promises that budgets never kept. The map in my head is 2 maps overlaid, the official one, with its colors and stops that council members can pronounce into ribbons, and the other, the one I started collecting the year my son disappeared, and no camera could say which door took him. The arriving icon bore a designator the system should never display, K0. We have no K line. Dispatch, I said evenly. What do you have near the old river tunnel? Nothing, he said, brisk now, awake in the way men get when something violates their idea of the world. Why? Glitch, I said. I dragged the cursor over the icon, and it offered me a speed, 11 miles per hour, a length, 6 cars. Power draw wrong. It was pulling from a string of blocks we no longer fed. The system offered a route as if its feelings mattered. The route ran past 3 stations we don't staff anymore because no one lives on the river flats now, not since the third flood. Past that, it made a sharp left where left is wall and climbed toward the interlocking that separates green from orange. It did not slow. It flowed like water in a basement. "Do you want me to call the cops?" Dispatch asked, and I imagined uniformed officers in a room that smells like our room, staring at a bank of screens and practicing disbelief. "Negative," I said. "Probably a logging error." I zoomed. The icon held steady, like an animal refusing to be shooed. "Technicians can look in the morning. Next stop, Hickory Gate," my voice said on the internal feed, calm as a priest. "Doors open on the right." "We have no Hickory Gate." I switched to the driver to control line. No one called in. The rolling stock cameras showed the same thing over and over. A long night to nowhere. On camera 2, a woman slept with her mouth slightly open, clutching a paper bag that had the shape of dinner. On camera 4, someone had scratched a set of initials into the wall by the second seat from the door, the way teenagers do when they believe in future archaeologists. On camera 6, an ad for a mattress clung stubbornly to a frame that had been meant to hold real plastic, not 3 layers of overlapping tape. "Call the interlocking," dispatch said. "Tell them to go eyes on when the whatever it is reaches it." "Copy," I said. Then, because there are chores that keep terror from finding your throat, I wrote a maintenance ticket for a flickering light at beach. I set the ventilation at Haviland to circulate once an hour, because sometimes the air is the problem people can't name. I ticked time forward a minute with my fingertip and watched the K0 get nearer to a place we control. In the corner of the room, under the map and its polite pulsing, sits a shelf of things lost. Not the big lost and found, that's at Central Station, open weekdays 10 to 4, guarded by a woman named Nisha, who remembers children by what they loved enough to misplace. This is the other lost, the things night people scoop from platforms and stairwells between trains, because sometimes objects scare the daylight crew, and sometimes the daylight crew scares the objects. A cracked pair of glasses, a scarf that smells like wet wool even when it's dry, a child's shoe with a Velcro strap that never quite learned to stick, a plastic ring, a toy phone. I pick things up. That's how my right hand stays busy when the left is counting minutes. The toy phone weighs almost nothing. It's meant for a toddler. Big buttons with pictures instead of numbers. A tiny speaker that chirps when you press the star. A face sticker rubbed half off. It has no battery compartment. It has never had one. Press the star and it chirps anyway. When the K0 reached the interlocking, the camera there showed what I expected and hated, nothing. Track, the red eyes of signal aspect as if it were holding its breath for an express that never runs at this hour. The wall beyond, stained in a certain way because water, like rumor, finds the same paths over and over. I toggled the light control for the next station in line. The station lights came up like a nervous laugh. The internal feed said, in my voice, "Next stop, Ashdown. Doors open on the left." Ashdown is on the map, but no train had asked permission to enter it. I pulled up the power monitor and watched the draw dip and surge like a heartbeat that doesn't understand itself. Interlocking control. A new voice crackled into my ear. "This is not funny." "Agreed," I said. "Do you have any eyes inbound?" "A camera," she said. "And Vic, who doesn't get paid enough to believe in ghosts." Dead air. Then, more softly, "It's on the board but not on the rails. Can you put it in my hands?" I knew what she meant. Sometimes the software uses old expectations to keep itself from crashing. Sometimes you can shepherd it better if you give it a place to land. "I can clear the block if no movement detected." That's not what I asked, she said. I know, I said. Next stop, Marrow Street. My voice said, too calm to be true. Doors open on the left. I have a son. Had. Have. The grammar depends on the hour. He was 4 when he loved trains the way other boys love fire trucks. He pressed his palms to the windows at Central and named colors like spells. He would not sit on my lap if the bench had gum underneath, because he liked beginnings more than middles. On a Tuesday in March, the kind with rain that has forgotten what temperature is, he and his mother rode into the museum and back. On the way back, between stops, a door light tripped, and the driver held at a station not on their route. The records say that. The driver opened, closed, no incident. The cameras show nothing but a small boy's handprint, where glass is colder than air. When the train rolled into our station after, he wasn't on it anymore. We had his name on the news for 3 weeks. People messaged me with sympathy after it became clear that your name makes good paper for a month and bad paper for the rest of your life. My ex-wife moved to a city with fewer tunnels. I stayed here and learned how the map hums when it's trying to solve a problem it can't admit exists. Where would you like to receive it, I asked. The center pocket, interlocking control said, behind the school construction. If it exists, it'll hate that. Copy, I said, and told the map the lie it wanted. This is a train. I am clearing its way. The K0 took the path politely, like a man who tips badly but holds a door. Next stop, Hickory Gate, my voice said again. It made my teeth hurt. Doors open on the right. Dispatch breathed in my ear. You're not? No. I said I'm not. Then who? I don't know, I said, and let the unknown sit between us like a sleeping dog you refuse to step over. We're receiving 202. 202 shows your train clocking into a block. It didn't. The software does this when it can't tell you something directly, because it would break its own rules to do it. It flags, instead, the fact that time did not pass the way it thinks it should, which is the bravest thing a machine can do. Do you want me to kill power? Dispatch asked, and I imagined the city above me sighing as the neon goes thin. Hold, I said. If this was a malfunction, power cycling might bury it. If it wasn't, power cycling might invite it closer. There is a tone to these things, a little respect you learn to give stories that outlive the men who made them. On the Ashdown platform, the camera caught a blur at the far stair, a woman's coat maybe, the edge of a face, a bare knee, pale as a truth. She stopped when the station lights came up, turned as if she had been caught in her own kitchen at night. She held something small, the way a person carries a sandwich, or a kitten, or a phone. She was older than the last time I saw her. She is older than me now, in the pictures on the mantel. I closed my eyes and opened them again, because you are allowed that much magic in a room with a map. Next stop, Marrow Street. Doors open on the left. The K0 icon reached the pocket we had offered it. It paused. The camera showed only the pocket track's oil slick shine, as if someone had set a mirror face down. A breath caught in my throat in a way that did not respect my job. In the glass in front of me, the toy phone on the shelf lit, a star on plastic white, a glow with no battery to blame. I pressed it without meaning to. The chirp it made is for toddlers, a sound that exists in a world before uncertainty. The intercom fizzed, not the internal feed. The system-wide, the voice you use when you need to tell the whole city something at once and expect it to obey. I had not keyed it. Doors opening, said my voice. On the Ashdown camera, every door on a train that wasn't there folded back. Passengers don't fall for magic the way movies tell you they do. They hedge. They test with a toe, a breath, a turned shoulder. A kid with a skateboard touched the air where a door would be if there were a train. A woman pulled her purse closer to her chest, turned away, and then turned back, as if fear's hand on her shoulder had become rude. Someone laughed. Someone else said God without meaning anything ecclesiastical by it. On camera 3 in the Blue Line train I had been watching earlier, the sleeping woman stirred. She lifted her head, blinked, cursed a soft local curse. The ad for the mattress promised less insomnia if you settled your debt to foam. The child's faces on the ad looked like they were asleep, so they could sell to mothers. Doors closing, my voice said, kind as surgery. On the Ashdown platform, a small boy, 4, 5, ran between his mother's knees, the way my son used to when he wanted to turn a no into a yes, trusting entirely the hallway a body can make. He ran into the light and did not hit anything and vanished in the specific way you want to believe. No child can. His mother screamed, not a movie scream, the sound a person makes when the train leaves, with the part of you it never had permission to take. I stood. The chair rolled backward and banged the shelf. The toy phone slid and fell and didn't hit the ground. It hung in the air for an extra full second, like it was waiting for a hand to catch it from the other side. Then it dropped, light as a candy wrapper. Kill power, I said, and dispatch swore. Power cycling a system in motion takes a checklist longer than the time you spend on it. He threw 3 breakers anyway. The hum in the room changed pitch like a hive that just remembered it was bees. Lights on 2 stations hiccuped and came back sulky. My board went dark, then warm. On the Ashdown camera, the woman fell to her knees and slapped her palms on nothing and left warmth on air the way candles leave on photographs. You can't do that, the interlocking op said in the cool tone of someone who can't afford to cry. You can't take the whole city out on a hunch. It's not a hunch, I said, and the toy phone in my hand pressed the star by itself and chirped like a heart monitor. The K0 icon vanished. The software offered a balloon of text. Ghost train cleared, then swallowed it politely, as if to apologize for its joke. The monitors returned to their aquarium, empty tracks, the occasional janitor, a rat practicing stairs. Dispatch muttered about reports and reprimands, and he would cover for me, and please don't ever ask him to do that again. In the Ashdown feed, the woman's hands lifted from the perfect air and left 2 ghostly prints fading on nothing. She turned her head toward the camera. Her mouth shaped a name I know very well. The morning managers arrived at 6, smelling of clean shirts and the kind of sleep you earn by not knowing what night is like. I filled out 3 incident reports with words that made sense, then signed them with a hand that had not had a place to rest in hours. Someone brought donuts. Someone charted the power dip against a maintenance window and shrugged. The city above us stretched, checked its phone, and pretended to have dreamed nothing. At 9, after the commute, the woman from Ashdown came into central control. Not many people even know where we are. They pass under our rooms every day and never think about who pushes the announcements and turns the air and sends steel where steel must go. She had a face I had seen younger. She had been the kind of pretty that doesn't realize it, and now was simply true, in the way a person gets when she has buried enough people to stop asking why. She carried a paper bag that had once held a sandwich, or a kitten, or a phone. She didn't look at me. She set the bag on the counter and said to no one. He was holding my hand. Then she left, and the smell of wet wool followed her out. Inside the bag lay a child's shoe with a Velcro strap that would never quite learn to stick. The city is generous with its stories if you stay late. Over the next weeks, more voices came through the internal feed when they weren't supposed to, calling stops that don't exist in my tidy database. Hickory Gate again, a station called Unthank, a place called South March, that old maps list as a marsh. K0 rolled its impossible route 3 more times, always after 3, never at the top of the hour. We learned its habits and it learned ours. When it called doors, it wasn't only for the lost. Sometimes it took fear, sometimes it gave it back. Once a man put his palms to the space where a car should be and stepped backward as if something had nudged his knees. Once a dog bristled and then lay down. obedient to a whistle we couldn't hear. I do the brave thing now when it comes. I don't fight it with breakers, not unless someone is about to give the night what it cannot return. I open the right yards so it will hate them and pass. I light the wrong platforms so it will miss. I speak into my own microphone and fill the city with useless inventory, a clock that's 3 minutes slow, the names of bridges that don't exist anymore, smells the fans can't explain, so there is less room for the other voice to coil itself into the day. I never say my son's name out loud, not in the headphones, not in this room where the map loves names. Sometimes the toy phone lights by itself, and I put my palm over it, like you do a candle you mean to smother kindly. It warms my skin and pretends not to. Next stop, Marrow Street, my voice says on nights when I have not recorded anything, and somewhere under the river where the concrete sweats and paint remembers flood, a six-car nothing rides along a track we didn't lay, carrying everyone it's owed. The city will tell you there is no K-line. The city is technically correct. The K-line is a habit the tunnels picked up from us, the way we want everything to be a line with stops and starts. But habits are real. They make routes with or without your permission. The night has its own signage. The walls have their own way of reading maps. If you hear my voice call a station you can't find, don't follow it. If something like a door opens where no train waits, take a step back and find a human hand to hold. If you have a child with fingers like stars, put their palms on windows you trust and teach them to say the names of colors like spells, but keep a hand on their shoulder when the train says there's a shortcut. And if you have lost something that answers when the internal feed says a stop you've never ridden to, do not come to the platform alone. Bring someone who believes in inventory. Bring a person who can list what's in their pockets without looking. Keys, receipt, a coin from a country they have never seen. Bring something small that makes a noise that doesn't need a battery. Hold it in your hand. When the impossible doors open and the air exhales like a tunnel, remembering wind, press that star and make a toddler's chirp. Sometimes the night will blink, annoyed, like a driver caught at yellow who chooses red. Sometimes the doors will close on nothing, and the K0 will carry on, stubborn as a rumor. And sometimes, rarely, you will hear a small familiar laugh, like tape left on a radiator, and you will be forgiven for the way your knees go out. On my shelf under the polite pulsing map sits a paper bag and a shoe with a Velcro strap. Next to it, the toy phone, its face sticker half rubbed away by someone's thumb. When the lights in the room choose to go thin and the tunnels gather their own breath, I put my hand on the phone and feel the heat that plastic can hold if you let it, and I say into the mic, for everyone and no one, doors closing. The room waits. The city holds its map like a promise it's not sure it can keep. And somewhere below, in the pocket behind the construction that made us safe, steel rolls where steel shouldn't, and a small voice I know counts stops I've never learned, certain that if he gets to the right one I'll be there, standing in a light that doesn't exist, offering my hand through air that remembers both of us. Now on to the next story. They told us not to take the old road through the pines, not because of potholes or ice, but because of the things that walked there when the moon was fat. I laughed when I heard it. I had just moved to the valley, renting a cabin on the cheap while I tried to restart my life. Divorce, layoffs, the usual collapse when everything falls apart at once. You look for quiet. The cabin was cheap because the locals said the road cursed the whole ridge. They swore that people went missing, that livestock turned up torn in ways no coyote could manage, that some nights you heard howling that wasn't quite animal. Of course I thought it was folklore. I thought every small town needed its monster. That was before I learned what walked between the trees. The first week was uneventful. The cabin had its quirks, pipes that moaned, windows that didn't quite fit their frames, but nothing sinister. I bought groceries in town, smiled politely at the old-timers who muttered warnings, and spent nights reading by the fireplace. The silence felt heavy, but after city noise, I welcomed it. Then came the first full moon. I was chopping wood out back when I noticed the forest had gone still. No wind in the branches, no birds. Even the creek down the slope sounded muffled. I told myself I was imagining it, but my hands were sweating. Then came the sound, a long, drawn-out howl that rose and cracked like a human voice carried too far. It wasn't a wolf. I'd heard wolves in documentaries, in zoos. This howl had a shape, something deliberate in its tone, as if it wasn't announcing itself but asking. I froze, axe raised, heart beating too loud. Then it stopped. The woods remained silent, but I swore something out there was listening for me. That night, I barred the cabin door and kept the fire stoked. Around midnight, I heard footsteps on the porch. Heavy, two-legged, I crept to the window, pulled the curtain just an inch. Moonlight fell across the yard, and there, moving between shadows, was a figure. Tall, wrong, its body hunched, covered in coarse hair that bristled silver in the light. Its arms were too long, ending in claws that scraped wood. The head, God, the head was caught between shapes. Muzzle stretching like an animal's, but eyes that gleamed with a knowing hunger. It sniffed the door, snarled, and then it whispered, my name. I staggered back, nearly knocking over the lamp. How could it know my name? No one in town had called to me like that, not even my ex on the phone. The voice was ragged, torn between growl and speech, but it was mine. The thing circled the cabin. The windows rattled as it pressed its weight against them, testing. I shoved furniture against the door, every muscle shaking. The fire popped and hissed, and each sound felt like it gave me away. Then, just before dawn, silence. I didn't sleep. The next day, I drove into town. The locals looked at me like they already knew. At the diner, I finally asked, what's on the old road? The waitress, white hair, hands that shook, set down my coffee and said, not what, who? She told me about the legend. Decades back, a logging crew tried to cut too deep into the ridge. Something killed them. Their bodies were found shredded, faces twisted in terror. Since then, every few years, people vanished under a full moon. Some said it was a curse. Others said it was the ridge reclaiming what was stolen. But the oldest stories said a man made a bargain out there, traded his soul for strength, and the price was eternal hunger. They wear faces, she whispered, sometimes voices. Don't answer if it calls to you. Packed up, cut my losses. But some part of me needed to know if it was real, if the thing that spoke my name was just a dream born from loneliness. This time, I prepared, boarded the windows, kept the rifle close, lit every lamp I had. At midnight, the howling came again, louder, closer, then knocking, not claws, knuckles, 3 deliberate raps at the door. Let me in. My blood froze. The voice was my ex-wife's. I gripped the rifle, teeth clenched. You're not her, I said, though my voice shook. Please, it begged, breaking into sobs that were hers, perfectly hers. It's so cold out here. Just open the door, please. The door creaked under pressure. The boards groaned. I aimed the rifle and fired a shot through the wood. A scream erupted, not human, not animal. Something caught between. The boards held. Then came the sound of retreat, claws scratching wood as it leapt from the porch. The next morning, bloody claw marks scarred the door, and in the yard, pressed into the mud, were footprints, bare, human. I couldn't stay. I packed what I could, loaded the truck, and started down the old road. The forest pressed close. Every curve felt like it was hiding something just beyond the tree line. I kept the gun on the seat beside me, eyes darting. Halfway down the ridge, the radio crackled to life. I hadn't turned it on. Static, then my son's voice. Dad? I slammed the brakes, breath choking me. My son hadn't spoken to me in months, not since the divorce. His voice was younger, though, softer. "Dad, come get me, please." The radio hissed, then laughter, low, hungry. I threw the truck into gear and sped the rest of the way down, refusing to look at the mirrors. I never went back to the cabin, never set foot on the old road again. But some nights, when the moon is high, I hear it outside my new apartment, on the fire escape, claws scraping metal, and always it whispers my name. Now on to the next story. The first time the building screamed, it used the intercom. I was halfway through my midnight rounds at the Charlemagne, 12 floors of brick and stubbornness on the edge of the old financial district, when every speaker in the place clicked alive at once. Usually the intercom coughs and clears its throat before it learns what to say. That night it found a pitch it liked and held it. The sound wasn't words, it was the absence of them stretched thin until they cut. Tenants opened their doors on chains and looked at me like I had promised them. Quiet and was now breaking contract. Somewhere a baby started crying, and the crying didn't stop when the sound did. It dwindled slowly like a coin spinning down on a counter, and left an echo in the lobby that made me feel like I was listening to a recording of my own breathing. "It's the wiring," I told Mrs. Patel in 3B, who watched me peel back the metal faceplate like I had a better plan than to stare at it. "Old building, old bones. Sometimes they complain. Bones don't sing," she said, and shut the door gently so it wouldn't seem like she was slamming it in my face. I didn't sleep that morning because the building had decided I shouldn't. I sat at the desk in the night office with the logbook open and my pen placed neatly on the line for 0358, district-wide power hiccup, and watched the monitor that shows the front door. It's an old system, the kind with a burned-in after image of the doormat, and a polite ghost of every person who's ever stood too long in the lobby. When sunlight finally came and colored the marble, the monitor flickered once, and the after image of a woman in an old-fashioned coat straightened and walked away as if she'd been waiting all night and was late for an appointment I couldn't keep. Everyone has an opinion about the Charlemagne's age. The finance people say 1923 because that's when the money arrived. The romantics say 1899 because the cornies mean something to them. The plumbers say 1978 because that's when the last sensible person touched the main. For the tenants, it has always been here. For the neighborhood, it is the building the bus shouts before it stops. For me, it was supposed to be a winter job that turned into 7 years of listening for the noises a structure makes when it wants to be a person and can't. There's a story that the Charlemagne used to be a hotel for brokers and their mistresses. There's another story that it was a sanatorium for men who looked fine until they didn't. There's a third story that it was a boarding house for singers who never got past Tuesday night. In the basement, behind the boiler, there's a room that used to be a laundry with a drain, so wide the city came and measured it twice. In the laundry's far wall, there's a door that never opens but always rattles when you pass, as if the air has lodged there. After the intercom scream, I paid attention to rattles. 3 nights later, the building sang again, but this time it picked an instrument, the elevator cables. It started as a hum you only feel in your fillings. Then it found a note and pushed until the note insisted on being heard. The car lurched between 6 and 7 and hung in the wrong place long enough to make a man in a suit lose his religion. I climbed into the shaft with a flashlight and a prayer I don't use for anything else. The cables twitched like an animal pinned for examination. When I put my hand on the steel housing, the sound came up my arm like -10 weather. In the dark, I heard something that wasn't me move at the top of the hoistway. A shift, a footfall. I shined the light up. Dust glittered in a column like the inside of a throat. "Hello?" I asked, because I am polite even to dumb ideas. The hum cut off so sharply I swallowed it. The elevator shuddered, remembered its job, and slid into place with the exact same misalignment it's had since '98. In the morning, Mr. Dunning from 7F died in his armchair. He had been 87 and industrious about pretending not to be. The paramedics were precise and respectful. He might as well have been a sheriff in a dead town from the way the young ones handled him. I stood in the hall with my hands behind my back, because my father taught me it makes grief think you're ready for it. The intercom speaker in the ceiling buzzed softly, the way bars used to buzz when neon hummed a little prayer. Mrs. Palin 3B watched from her door, hand on the chain, mouth a tight white line you only see on women who have outlasted 6 kinds of men. When they wheeled him out, the intercom clicked alive and said very clearly, "Mr. Dunning, arriving." It wasn't my voice. It wasn't human. It was the building's idea of a word, and it picked the wrong one. I called a vendor about the intercom. He said they could put me on a list. I asked about the elevator sheaves. He told me that if I didn't want to replace the whole system, I should learn to sing. I left 2 messages for the management company and got one polite return call that said, "We hear you," which is what a body says to a tumor when it's busy. That night, at 2, the building woke me again. Not the speakers, the pipes. There's a particular moan old copper makes when it cools. There's another the risers make when the top floors shower at once, and the water has to choose. This wasn't that. This was every elbow and union and sag in the whole system, inhaling at once. Then the building exhaled a sound so low, I had to put my ear to the radiator to know it wasn't my heart. Mia in 12E called the desk. She is the type of person who uses my name when she's asking for something and nothing when she's done. "The apartment is crying," she said without preamble. "Steam heat does that," I said, sitting up. "The couch springs have learned my shape too well. It's old. It remembers things it shouldn't." "No," she said. "It said my mother's name." "Names travel," I told her, "through the pipes, through the shafts, someone on another floor. No one else knows it." She breathed, and the phone did a small, sympathetic click. "The old one, the one we don't say, because we started a new life." "Do you want me to come up?" "No," she said quickly, and then softer. "Yes, I took the stairs, because elevators make me feel watched now. The hallway on 12 holds sound like a chapel." Mia's door was open, chain off, which meant she wasn't thinking about safety anymore. She stood in the center of her living room, arms crossed tight, as if her ribs had promised to hold her together. The radiator in the corner was hot enough to be a sin. It hissed with effort, like an old man dressed too warm on a spring day. In the hiss, a breath, and then Anya, Mia covered her mouth. I went over and laid my palm on the iron. There was a rhythm to it, a slight lift at the end like a question. The pipes have tone. Sure, the whole building plays itself if you're inside it long enough. But this was formed. This was a name stuffed into steam like a note in a bottle. In the silence afterward, the floor above us let go a slow creak, not the movement of wood, but the kind weight makes when it decides to settle for the night. I looked up and saw in the ceiling stain by the window a shape I had never noticed, a woman's hair, or a tide that had chosen a direction. Mia said, "How long will this go on?" And I told her a lie I thought she could spend. "It was cold tonight. It will stop. The building complains when the weather changes." "I changed," she said, without looking at me. I started keeping a list of the building's noises, not the usual, those I keep anyway, because if you don't write down what happens the same way every day, it grows teeth. The list had a column for time, one for location, one for what the sound sounded like before I told myself it was pipes. Intercom scream, 0358, building wide. Cable hum, 0112, elevator hoistway. Radiator whisper, 02912E. Anya. I didn't add Mr. Dunning's death because you should not let buildings make your lists for you. The Charlemagne didn't care whether I wrote it down. It had its own list. 2 days after the pipe spoke Mia's old name, something woke me again. Noises learn you. If you listen too hard, then they use themselves on you. The lobby camera showed the front door easing open without hands. Wind does that. There's a trick to old doors where the pressure and the hinge play a game, and the wideness of the hall invites. The door swung to, slow and ceremonial, then closed. The doormat shifted as if something had brushed it with a knee-length coat. A single gray hair blew across the tile and got stuck on the brass strip. On 7, the elevator sighed itself into place. On 6, a child cried once in his sleep. On 3, water moved behind a wall as if a person had leaned there to listen. On 9, the phone in the hall outside 9A, God knows why we still keep a hall phone on 9, rang once and kept the idea of ringing long after the sound died. At 4:14, the intercom popped twice and said perfectly clearly, "Don't answer the door." My hand was already on the knob to go check the lobby. I let go of it the way you let go of a stove when you realize it's on. I stood in the night office and listened to empty air, willing it to have nothing else to say. Across the hall, the bulletin board with outages and please break down your boxes and notice of annual lint trap clean had a new sheet pinned under a push pin with a bent head, a rectangle of paper cut from lined notebook, the edges ragged in the way a person's teeth rag a piece when they are trying to rip and keep it straight. On it, in a hand I didn't recognize, "She calls before." I took it down and held it under the desk lamp, like a cop in a movie I don't believe in. The ink had bled in 2 spots, tears or careless. In the bottom right corner, tiny and careful, 12E. I went upstairs. Mia's door was closed, chain on. I knocked once with the softness of someone who knows doors and their limits. She didn't answer. Through the wood, I heard the slow turn of someone's foot on the floorboards, and then the deliberate nothing people make when they decide to pretend they aren't home. The city has a notion of itself in the small hours. It's not the one the tourism board prints. It's the shape of light on a cracked tile. It's the sound of a bus kneeling for a person who changes their mind. It's the man in the vestibule across the street who always reads the sports page first, even if the headline is about a war. The Charlemagne learned that shape and started wearing it. The list grew. 013, stairwell B, 3rd floor landing, whispers between banister and wall, tell her, then noise from the pipe. 0158, intercom selective, 6F only, baby monitor static, no baby in building in 6. 0247, basement, laundry drain, echo of wind where no wind should be, rattle of the sealed door, 30 seconds later. 0322 7F, vacant, radio station from nowhere, the old big band hour cut mid-chorus. 0359 building wide, pressure drop, lungs of the building breath in, intercom coughs but does not speak. I asked the daytime super to listen to the recordings. Old concrete, he said. It holds the old station broadcasts. We did this in '04 when the Riverlight building started singing Patsy Cline into the water heater. Don't get poetic. I called my mother because mothers are the saints of dumb calls. Have you ever heard of a banshee? I asked, not because I believe in the old country we never lived in, but because naming is a tool, except not one that wails outside a cottage door, one that uses what's available. Every building, my mother said, pragmatically, has a widow. That's the person who knows where the sound comes from. Find her and bring her a chair. What if the widow isn't a person? I asked. She still needs a chair, my mother said, and hung up to make soup for people who refused to ask. I carried a chair to the basement and set it near the drain, far enough that it wouldn't get wet if the old steam traps spit, close enough that the rattling door could see it if seeing happened in the dark. I sat. I told the room the names of tools the way I say them to apprentices. Here is a strap wrench. Here is a length of pipe. Here is the hammer you do not call a hammer, because words make habits, and habits make slips. After a long time, the rattle softened, and someone I couldn't see took a breath that made the dust lift off the chair as if a hand had brushed it. Mrs. Dunning, I said, because the building had started using the names of our dead, and I wanted to offer back a name that made sense. You don't have to stay. The drain sighed and resumed being a circle cut in concrete. The third week, Mia left 12E. She didn't tell me. People don't. When they fear I'll talk them out of it or into it. The moving truck showed, and I stood by the door holding the pad to keep it from slamming, because the door slams when it thinks you're making a mistake. She came down last with a duffel and the notebook paper sign that said "Esh-E calls" before folded into a small, dense square. She didn't look at me. I didn't make her. The elevator insisted on stopping 2 inches low. She stepped over it without swearing, which told me how tired she was. 2 nights later, 12E phoned the desk. I answered, not thinking. The line carried wind from far away, the specific sound of a stairwell when no one is in it, a breath. My name, spoken like a person practicing what a mouth could do. Arriving, the intercom said behind me. Who is this? I asked, which is the wrong question when calling has already chosen you. The line clicked and left the idea of being open. In 12E, the hallway light flickered twice. Slow, a shadow passed across the door like a person deciding not to knock. At 0302, someone pounded on 10A hard enough to clock the jam. I got there sweating and half-booted, keys in my hand as if they were more than shaped metal. Mr. Tone cracked the door and looked at me like it had done him a private wrong. Who? I asked. A woman with hair all the way down, he said, pantomiming with a hand to his scalp. She did not ask to be let in. She told me to open. What did she tell you? She told me, he said carefully, that she had come to tell me a thing I already knew. He looked over his shoulder into the dark. I did not let her. On the monitor for the front door, long hair blurred across the glass. The doormat lifted and settled. The door swung, then settled again. The elevator hardware on the roof made one emphatic clank like a cymbal. The call sheet in my pocket had Mr. Tromune's name, circled from the afternoon, when he told me he had an appointment Tuesday. Oncology, joking voice, eyes like someone reading a recipe, and not for cookies. I wrote in the log, because writing is a way to stay polite when you're talking to death. 0302, knock 10A. Did not open. That morning, Mr. Who's sister rang the bell and walked in like a person who belongs. She had on new shoes, and the kind of coat people keep for a wedding or a final appointment. She took the elevator without asking, and came down an hour later with a small bag and a face arranged carefully into an expression she wouldn't have liked to be caught with in public. She nodded at me the way you nod at the hungry, grateful, apologizing, and left. The Charlemagne kept its throat clear for 2 days. I took the opportunity to do normal work, changed 2 boiler gaskets, one without swearing, freed a stuck sash in 8C, wrote a note to the management company suggesting winter paint would be useful in spring, swept salt from the lobby so the marble wouldn't forget itself. I almost believed in ordinary. On the 3rd night, the building started using the phone. No one was at the desk with me at 2 a.m. because no one is, and the list of the building's noises had grown quiet enough that my hand started to look like my father's again, instead of something I had borrowed. The phone on the wall rang once. It's the line people use when they want me right now. I picked up my pen first because old habits say that when a thing rings, you'll need to write down the name of a man who wants something you can't give. I answered. The room grew 1 size smaller. She calls before, the building said, into my ear in Mia's careful voice. Before what? I asked. Before, the building said, as if that explained anything a human could punctuate. The call ended. The line stayed open. The dial tone hummed under my skin, persuasive as a warm bath. I hung up. The phone rang again. Mrs. Patel stood in her doorway across the lobby and stared at me like a person who has decided that if you looked at a dog long enough, it would admit a trick. I smiled with half my mouth and lifted the receiver again, because I don't know how not to. A whisper, "Don't answer the door." The line clicked dead. When you have lived inside a building long enough that you know which handrail hums and which handrail sighs, you start not believing in coincidences. I took the stairs to 9 because 9 keeps secrets. The hall phone there, Polaroid yellow, its cord coiled in the exact amount of mess the day is willing to stand, rested on its shelf like a pet. Its receiver was just barely off the hook, as if someone had set it down so gently. The phone wasn't sure whether to tell anyone the line was open. I lifted it, expecting to hear nothing. A sound came back, not voice. Wind through teeth, a woman catching her breath after running the kind of distance that wasn't yards. The little click of a tongue wetting its lip. Then a word, not in English. Then, perfectly clear, "Arriving." I said, "You have to stop that." The line laughed once in a way I wouldn't call unkind, and gave me a dial tone. Since the day my father died, I have believed in two kinds of warnings: the useful ones that tell you how to stand so your back will not break, and the useless ones that tell you a truck is coming too late for you to step aside. The Charlemagne offered both. The building said, "Don't answer the door," and I listened, and Mrs. Koroliova in 2D didn't, and the nurse who came with the oxygen tank did not have to ring twice. A week later, after 3 knockings that went unanswered and 2 pipes that whispered names I have not written because they are my own, I was down in the laundry checking the lint traps for the annual notice and thinking how no one ever reads it when the sealed door in the back wall rattled like someone on the other side had woken from a long sleep and wanted air. I set my palm against the cold paint. The rattle wasn't a hand. It was the way wind insists when it has something true to say, and the world has built something dumb where it needs to go. I pressed my ear to the seam and heard plumbing behave in a way no inspector would sign off on. Pipes set as a mouth, moving whispers along from floor to floor until they pooled here in this dumb end room where steam used to go to rest. In the whisper, my name, then another, a list like someone holding roll call at the end of a shift. "Do you want me to open it?" I asked the old paint. The building inhales when you make bad offers. It didn't. It waited. "I can't," I said, more to myself than to Brick. Even if I could, I'd be unwriting work other men did. They knew something I don't. The door rattled again, less angry, more irritated, like a woman who has told you politely twice and is now wasting both of your time. Then the building exhaled through the drain in a tone that lifted hairs. In it, a phrase my grandmother said when she didn't want us to go out on New Year's, not because of drunks, though there were those, not because of cars, because she calls before, and we are not always good at telling women no. After that, the calls became precise. The intercom wail moved from building wide to surgical. 2 tones and then arriving, then a floor, sometimes a number, sometimes a name. The building had decided to practice being bureaucratic about what it wanted. No one wanted to be the person I told about patterns in a night. I told them anyway. "If you hear the speakers pop twice," I said, "call me. Don't open, not until you see me." "It's an old building," the management said. "You can't frighten people with stories." "It's a building that eats names," I said, and left the phone where it couldn't reach the rest of my mouth. The night I realized it had decided on me, I was unlocking the roof so the vent tech could get where he needed when the intercom clicked twice, building wide, and said my name, not my job. "Arriving," it added like a boarding announcement. I stood very still, Not yet, I said to the nearest grill. The grill breathed on me in response, the clean dust smell of air that's tried. I felt the building collect itself. I went down. I put a chair in front of the door of the night office and sat with my hands on my knees like a man in a small town, police station in 1954, who knows who's coming and why. I removed the intercom fuse and set it on the desk so the building would know I was serious, then set the fuse back where it belonged because promises are tools you don't use unless you can hold them all the way. At 03:59, the intercom did not speak. At 04:03, someone knocked on the glass of the front door, polite like a widow. I did not answer. The door swung open an inch and closed again, because hinges have habits too. The mat lifted, settled, lifted. On the monitor, the burn-in of every person who has stood too long in the lobby grew brighter for a second, like a long exposure photograph trying to collect itself. A woman in a coat that knew we used to have fur turned her head and faced the camera. Her mouth moved. I could not hear her. I lifted the receiver of the front desk phone. No dial tone. I set it down, and the phone rang. I picked up and heard the sound of the stairwell on 9. Then don't answer the door. I know, I said, to the building, to the stairwell, to my father, who taught me that if a man knocks at 3 in the morning, he is selling either Jesus or violence, and on the right street those are the same thing. I waited. At 04:14, the intercom in 12E crackled. The apartment Mia used to have, the one that still smelled faintly of rose soap when I'd fixed the sill last, and said in the careful voice the building had learned from her, she calls before. The pipes breathed in, out. The drain in the basement sighed. The elevator twitched and stayed where I had told it to. The knock on the front door came again, the polite kind. Again, again. On the fourth knock, it lost patience, and the frame answered with a deep, low thud that made me think of trees that forget which direction is up. I stayed in the chair. The building stayed. At 04:25, the knock stopped. The doors to the mailboxes rattled in sequence like someone running their hand along a xylophone. A woman's hair crossed the lobby once, twice again, and then nothing. The phone breathed. The intercom slept. I waited until 05 to stand, because the shape of 4:30 belongs to the dead, and I didn't want to make a habit of violating their hour. When I did, the lobby smelled very faintly of rain, though nothing wet had come in from outside. The brass strip at the door had a single gray hair caught in it, and when I pinched it free, it crumbled like ash. At 6, the building did something I had never seen it do. It let morning in. The glass went the real color of dawn, cigarette paper, then tea. The marble remembered how to act expensive. The monitor lost some of its ghosts and showed only the doormat and the day. Mrs. Patel came down with a bag she refused help with, because refusing help has kept her alive a long time. She looked at me, and for the first time since intercom scream night, smiled with her whole face. "What did you do?" she asked. "Sat." I said, "Good." She said, "Men get up to make a mess. The Charlemagne has not stopped calling since. It doesn't call every night, and it doesn't always ask for anyone we know. Sometimes it says a name that belongs to a person no one remembers, until someone in 4C says she had that teacher in 2nd grade who wore her hair high and said the names of birds in a way no man could stand. Sometimes it says a floor, and we all wait, and nothing happens, and you'd be a fool to think that's the good kind. Sometimes it whispers into the pipes in the stairwells and the hall phone on 9, and sometimes it offers no warning, and an apartment gets very quiet, and a person sits down, and the city grows one grief heavier and one voice louder when it asks for quiet. But it doesn't come in when we don't open. If you rent at the Charlemagne, I will tell you the rules the day you sign, because property managers print rules that matter to insurance, and I print rules that matter to staying. If the intercom pops twice, call me. If it says a name, don't repeat it. Names carry better when you lend them breath. If something knocks softly, look through the peephole, but don't look out the lens. Look at the frame. The frame will tell you if there's weight on the other side. If you hear a woman's hair move across the door, and it sounds exactly like your mother's when she shook rain out of it in the kitchen, make tea and wait for it to stop. If the elevator hums, take the stairs. If the hall phone rings on 9, let it. I will answer. I have the kind of ear the building prefers. I don't always like that, but I'm here. If you need to leave, leave quickly and take nothing that teaches the building your weight. If you have to stay, bring a chair. Sit somewhere the building can see you. Be patient. Fill a room with the names of tools and soups and street corners until the night remembers how ordinary it can be when it tries. If you must cry, cry at 5. 4:30 belongs to other business. We hung a small brass plate by the front door last week. The board approved it after arguing about fonts. It doesn't say Charlemagne or no bicycles in lobby, or even built 1923, like the finance men crave. It says, don't answer the door, and then, beneath, in smaller letters, a lawyer will pretend are a joke. She calls before. Most nights the plate is just a plate. Some nights, if you look at the lobby camera, when the intercom sleeps and the drains take their own kind of breath, you'll see the burn-in of a woman in a coat. Read the plate carefully, as if she's decided to be polite about it, and step back into the glass. Then the doormat will lift and settle, and the marble will warm under the idea of morning, and we'll begin again with laundry and packages, and boilers, and a hand-run vacuum, because machines wake ghosts, and someone somewhere in the neighborhood will tell a story about a banshee with an old voice. They're wrong about the voice, but they're not wrong about the telling. Now on to the next story. I didn't believe the stories about the river until I saw the lights myself. Everyone in town had a version. They said if you drove the South Road by the water at night, you'd see lanterns bobbing on the current, sometimes red, sometimes white, sometimes blue, like a torch drowned too deep. Old men said they were the souls of miners who drowned in the floods of 22, forever looking for the path home. Teenagers swore they were UFOs, swamp gas, or headlights playing tricks. The church folk shook their heads and muttered about demons that mimicked light to lure you close. I thought it was folklore, the kind towns like ours needed to keep themselves interesting, until the night I followed them. It started simple. I was restless. The cabin I rented sat 2 miles off the river, with no neighbors except raccoons that knew how to raid trash bins. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't read. The night pressed heavy, so I got in my truck and drove. The road to the river was narrow, lined with leaning oaks that made the headlights crawl like nervous fingers. At the bend where the asphalt ran close to the water, I saw it, a pale blue light hovering just above the current, bobbing gently as if tied to a boat that wasn't there. I slowed, squinting. It wasn't a reflection. It wasn't the moon. It pulsed softly, like it was breathing. Then another appeared 20 yards downriver, glowing red. Then another, white closer to the bank. I pulled over, killed the engine. The night swallowed the sound, leaving only the lapping of water and the drone of insects. The lights didn't waver. Something in me said go home. But another part, the part that's broken in people like me, said find out. I climbed down the embankment, gravel crunching under my boots. The first light, the pale blue one, drifted closer. It was the size of a lantern flame, but there was no smoke, no heat. I reached out. It darted back. Not fast, not natural, like it was teasing. Hello, I said, my own voice sounding foolish. The light pulsed once, then it moved further downstream, pausing as if waiting for me. I followed. The riverbank narrowed, brush grabbing my sleeves, mud sucking at my boots. The lights formed a path now, blue, red, white, red again, like breadcrumbs scattered on black water, always just far enough to make me chase, never close enough to touch. The deeper I went, the quieter the forest became. No frogs, no insects, even the river seemed to hush. My chest tightened, my breath came loud in the silence. Then I saw her. She stood in the shallows 20 feet ahead, water lapping at her calves. A woman in a gray dress that clung to her body like it had been soaked for years. Her hair hung long and black, dripping into the current. Her face was pale, almost luminous, and her eyes burned like the lantern lights. The lights hovered around her now, orbiting her head like fireflies, too disciplined to scatter. I froze. She raised her hand, beckoning. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my legs moved forward, one step, then another, as if her gesture carried weight. The mud sucked deeper at my boots. The water reached my knees. "Come closer," she whispered. Her voice wasn't carried by the night. It was inside my skull, intimate as breath. My mouth opened without my permission. "Who are you?" She tilted her head. The lights brightened. One who waits, one who was left. My feet kept moving. I was chest deep now, current tugging. The light swirled faster, dizzying. Her hands stretched toward me, and then I remembered what the old men had said. The lights are bait. Don't follow them, no matter what they promise. I slammed my eyes shut, dug my nails into my palms until the sting broke the trance. When I opened them again, the lights had multiplied, dozens, maybe hundreds, bobbing on the water, surrounding me in a ring of color. The woman's face twisted, not angry, but hungry. Her mouth opened, wider and wider, until it split her face in half. The lights poured toward me, searing bright, their glow filling my eyes until I couldn't see. I threw myself backward, half swimming, half stumbling. My hands clawed at mud, branches, anything solid. Something brushed my ankle, slim fingers, cold as river stone. I kicked wildly, broke free, and scrambled up the bank on hands and knees. Behind me, the lights wailed. That's the only way I can describe it. Not sound, but pressure, a chorus of grief that pressed against my bones. Then silence. I didn't stop running until my truck was in sight. I tore the door open, fumbled the keys, and gunned the engine so hard, gravel spit from under the tires. The rearview mirror showed nothing but darkness. Back at the cabin, I bolted the door and sat shaking until dawn. I told no one who would believe me. In town, they'd just nod, the way people nod when they've heard another fool join the list of near misses. But I've noticed something since. Every night when the river is close, I see faint glimmers through the trees, not bright enough to mistake for lanterns, not loud enough to make me follow, just enough to remind me they're there. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I hear her voice, soft and patient. Not yet, but soon. Now on to the next story. I didn't notice the missing mirrors until I'd been in the apartment a week. Sublets in this city come like hasty apologies. Too quick, a little insulting, and you take them anyway because you need them. A friend of a friend needed 3 months overseas, and I needed a place where my ex wouldn't know to knock. 12th floor, pre-war bones, good light, bad heat. I lugged 2 suitcases and a sewing machine up the narrow stairs because the elevator enjoys deciding, and told myself I could make anywhere livable if it had a table. I'm a tailor, nights mostly. People don't think they need clothes fixed until the evening an event eats them. I've hemmed prom dresses at midnight over a bathtub. I've stitched a tuxedo shoulder while a man repeated his vows into a hairbrush so he could get the tremble right. It's honest work, and it keeps me near the hum of the city after hours. I like the hum. It sounds like survival. The apartment was furnished, IKEA pretending to be older than it is. A scratched oak table that had real weight when you leaned on it. Long windows facing the river that the air insisted still existed under the fog. What it didn't have, I realized on the 4th evening when I tried to check whether my eyeliner made me look like I'd slept, was a mirror, not in the bathroom, not behind the bedroom door, not the cheap courtesy square in the front hall most landlords leave. I laughed and propped my phone against a mug and practiced compromises. On the sixth night, a note slid under my door. We haven't met. Midnight fittings at Nocturne, if you still do house calls. Cash, Nocturne, was one of those clubs that look like wealth leaned against a wall and decided to take up smoking. Black door, silent doorman, the name in script you had to already know how to read. I'd never been inside. I'd hemmed 2 dresses on the sidewalk while a girl with an ankle tattoo cried with gratitude and handed me money like it was a secret. I texted the number at the bottom of the note and got an address with no apology for the hour. I packed my kit: chalk, needles, 2 sizes of shears, tape measure, leather thimble that fits only my ring finger, a handful of safety pins, because panic wants what it already understands. At 11:45, I stepped into a night that had practiced being colder and took a bus that argued with its own headlights. Nocturne's door opened as I approached, as if it had been waiting specifically for my footsteps to answer. The doorman nodded like we had a story between us and led me past a velvet rope that might as well have been a border. Inside, the air was money and mistake. The bar lights were low enough to keep people beautiful. The mirrors behind the bottles had been replaced by black glass. "Why?" I said to the bartender, because not saying names is a kind of refusal. He flicked his gaze toward the stairs and returned to polishing a glass he had already polished. I climbed. The upstairs rooms sat like ideas about privacy, curtains instead of doors, sofas that had seen restraint, a hallway runner that pretended it had never met a heel. At the end, a room with a closed door and taped on it neatly, a strip of card that read "Why." I knocked. "Enter," a voice said, not loud, not theatrical, tired and better at hiding it than most. Why was a woman in a black dress that had been stitched by someone who thought seams should be felt. Pale, not the anemic kind, more the expensive sort, like paper made from linen. Hair too dark to be natural at her age, but no lines around her mouth to tell you the age. She held herself like a person who has practiced not needing chairs. "The straps," she said, gesturing without looking at herself. "They fall. My tailor is indisposed." "I'm your tailor," I said, "because if you save people from embarrassment at midnight, they belong to you a little." "Tonight," she said. I measured. She stood still with a patience I don't get from most human beings. Skin cool, under the tape measure, perfume like old rain. When I pricked my finger and swore softly, everyone swears, but I apologize for it. Her eyes flicked to the dot of blood like a cat noticing a laser pointer. I put my finger in my mouth the way a child learns to. She smiled, not with kindness, and glanced away. "Do you always work at night?" she asked while I pinned. "Nights are when people figure out the fit was hope and not measurement." "Ah," she said, "clothes and lives, both." When I finished, she handed me twice what we'd agreed. "Tonight again," she said, neither question nor command, and I said, against the part of my better sense that lives in my hands, "Text me." She didn't. She sent another card under my door. The handwriting was printed, careful, the sort a school teacher drills into children who want to grow messy. The second note asked for shortening a coat. The third asked for the impossible, add fabric to a vintage dress. I told her vintage is never truly vintage. Anything that survived did so because it learned to stretch. She laughed without sound and poured me a drink I pretended to sip. When the club closed, she walked me out. It was nearly dawn. Nocturne's door pushed me into a street gray enough to erase faces. The doorman was gone. The light above the door had been blackened from the inside. The city in early morning reminded me of my ex's apartment after the last box leaves, edges and dust. "Do you live nearby?" I asked, Because I am not above needing details to keep people real. Close enough, she said. The hand she lifted to tuck her hair back underlined the presence of veins. The blue there glowed slightly, or maybe the streetlight insisted on finding something to illuminate. You're good, she added. You don't waste movement. My teacher broke sticks over my wrists when I was 12. I said deadpan, taught me economy. She tilted her head, pleased or pitying. I couldn't tell. Will you come tomorrow? She asked. Where? Home, she said, as if that were a shape the night could hold. The address she texted the next day was mine. I stared at my phone until the rattle in my walls, which has a schedule I pretend not to know, shook a memory loose. The first night I'd moved in, I'd found a box of nails under the sink that had been sorted by size with the care of moral certainty. The second night I'd found a drawer empty behind the stove, too clean, too intentional. The third night I discovered, when I ran my hand along the back of the bedroom closet, a panel that came away under my palm, not like a secret door, but like a direction the wall had been meaning to go. Are you downstairs? I texted. Yes, she replied. Do you live under me? Above, she wrote, and below. I opened my door. The hallway was empty the way a throat is empty between words. I looked both directions because if you don't check, you'll be the person who tells the at last story wrong. A card slipped under my door while I had it open, cunning as a small animal. I bent to pick it up. Bring a full-length mirror, it said in that careful hand. If you have one. I thought about laughing and found I didn't know how to. I went hunting through thrift stores anyway that afternoon, asking for something every storekeeper told me they never got anymore. People keep mirrors, a woman behind a counter told me over a cup of coffee that costs $2 in a city that considers that price antique, or they break them where they stand. Bad luck follows movers. Or, she lowered her voice like a choir, someone's buying them up. In the end, I settled for a wardrobe door with a beveled glass set into it. It took two of us to carry it up the stairs. I tipped the other person more than I had because the weight of glass makes me grateful. At midnight, the card came again. Now, I set the wardrobe door against my wall and opened my apartment door. The hallway smelled like rain and varnish. The scent stair rails release when they decide to admit they were once trees. I stood, stupid, holding the edge of the door with one hand and my sewing kit in the other, the mirror standing in my doorway like an extra person at a party. Well, I said to no one. The mirror moved, not slid, not pushed. The glass wavered like heat rises. I saw my face and then behind my left shoulder, wise. The hallway behind me reflected empty. The glass insisted otherwise. Y lifted a finger to her lips. I stepped sideways because I have the habit of obeying the improbable when it's polite. She stepped out of the mirror. She didn't disturb the surface. She simply existed where she hadn't been, and the air rearranged itself around her with that faint electric feeling you get when you stand too close to a working transformer. Up close, in daylight, or the nearest thing to it, the city allows, the veins at her wrist shone like lines in a map to a country that shouldn't exist. You want me to sew inside that? I said, nodding, because if my mouth opened any wider, I wasn't sure what would come out. Not tonight, she said. Tonight I need help. Help is more expensive, I said, because reflexes save you from panic. She smiled with something like fondness. How much to carry a mirror downstairs? Depends if it tries to talk. It won't, she said. It's tired. We carried the wardrobe door down one flight. On the landing outside 11B, where the rail knits itself, a mark darkened the paint. Something had leaned there often enough to make the wall learn. We set the mirror there. What is this? I asked. A door, she said simply, that's been very patient. It was a mirror. My face, hers, a faint diffusion of the stairwell, all there. As I watched, the area that reflected the opposite landing went odd, the way a puddle in a hot street shakes. You put her palm flat to the glass. The only time I had seen a hand so pale touch something that gently was in my ex's grandmother's kitchen, where she would pat dough down as if she were apologizing. I reached up and put my hand next to hers. The glass was cool and mildly electric. It ticked under my palm like a clock. "Who's buying up the mirrors?" I asked, not because I thought the answer would help, but because words keep your mouth from asking worse questions. "We are," she said. "All of us. It's becoming difficult to find reflections that don't belong to other people." "Why?" "Because," she said, and the tick under my hand became a hume. "Doors close when they're told to. We tell them not to." The glass fogged under our hands, the way your breath fogs it when you are 12 and writing a name with your finger at a slumber party, and then cleared. The stairwell reflected back wrong. The shadows on the opposite landing slouched where no shadow should be. The banister's brass wore a scar it doesn't. Something moved on the other side, slow, patient, close to the ground, as if its knuckles dragged. "Don't open," Y said under her breath. "I don't open doors when someone tells me not to," I said, watching the other stairwell door blur between states. On our side, the building sighed, the long contented exhale of a radiator that remembers summer. On the other, a hand skittered onto the landing. Not a hand. The idea of one. Too many joints. The glass cooled abruptly. "Who's that?" I whispered. "A debt," Y said. "From before they named this place. We keep it out. Some of us better than others." I started, then stopped because there are words you don't say when a mirror is listening. "Husbandry," she said dryly. "Call it that. Of the night, of hungers, of doors. Pick the one that lets you sleep." The shape on the other landing retreated. The brass in the reflection lost its scar. The fog under our hands dissipated in a final delicate lace. Y lifted her palm. She had no print. The mirror held an after image of the both of us for a few seconds and then obeyed light again. "How many mirrors do you need?" I asked, useless and honest. "As many as we can manage," she said. "We seed them in places we live. We keep the day wearies and the night out. Sometimes, lately, the day wants the night too much and comes looking in glass." "You said you needed help," I said. "I do," she said, and did not look at me. She led me to her apartment, not above, not below, exactly. A quarter turn of hallways, and we were in a room with no windows, and a smell like stone after rain. The walls were hung with empty frames, gilt, wood, metal ornate as bad jewelry. Inside each, black glass, not painted over mirrors, not televisions. The first thing you learn working with thread is that different darknesses have different weights. This darkness had texture. It ate your gaze first, and then your certainty. "Trouser hems," she said trivially, holding up a pair of men's pants. "He'll be here at 1, 17 and a quarter on the right. Left is a hair off." "Why me?" I asked, reaching for chalk and grateful that my hands know what to do while my mind rearranges. "Because you work without looking," she said. "And because mirrors don't like you, everyone else's breath fogs them. You leave nothing." "Rude," I said, but my belly knew what she meant. My ex used to complain that selfies made me look like a stranger. Not bad, not false, just lagging, like an accent from a home I never had. Which watched me measure and fold, pin and double check. "Who taught you to work by touch?" "My grandmother," I said. "She used to sew with a cigarette in her mouth and never drop ash." "Did she tell you that in some houses, mirrors go to sleep?" "She told me in some houses, they dream." He arrived at 0106, not a he I would have expected, not a banker or a bully or a man with a day job that wants to be knight. A boy, really, late 20s at most, tense shoulders that didn't know how to be beautiful yet, eyes that would be tired if they weren't too busy being eager. He didn't cross into the room. He stood just outside the line of its door frame. "Ma'am," he said to Y, and he said "ma'am." like he'd grown up in a house with two sets of rules and was trying not to break either. He handed me his trousers with a gentleness I reserve for childhood toys. "You're the tailor." "I am," I said, and knelt to mark his cuff. His calves were strong in the way men get when they run at night. The chalk slid. I steadied. The hum behind the black glass stuttered, then steadied again, like a song the building and why could both remember. "Do you have mirrors in your apartment?" I asked, not looking up. It's easier to ask intrusive questions when the person thinks you are counting. "Two," he said. Y sucked her teeth softly. "We took the rest," she said to me. To him she only lowered her voice. "You promised." "Two to see if I'm dead," he said, wry. To me, "Sometimes you need to know if you're there. It helps with stares." "Mirrors lie," Y said, and for the first time her voice sounded like hunger. He left at 01:19. The hem would be ready at 2. My hands are honest. Y set the trousers aside and stared at the black glass on the wall as if it were an old friend trying to outstare her. "We keep the worst out," she said flatly. "Most nights. Some nights it comes as light. You wouldn't like those." "I would if I had to," I said, which is the sort of thing a person says when they have never had to live up to it. "You would," she said, and it didn't feel like praise. On my way home, I carried the wardrobe mirror back up to 12. My thighs burned. On the landing, someone had finger-drawn a small symbol in the dust, a circle with a notch like an open mouth. I wiped it with my sleeve without meaning to, and felt the hallway exhale gently in relief. In my apartment, I set the mirror against a wall and covered it with a sheet. The city practiced fog at dawn. Somewhere downriver, a ferry blew its horn in a tone that wanted to be a key. In the glass under the sheet, something ticked. I didn't sleep. I stitched. The hem came out clean. The next night I delivered it, and the boy's gratitude was so unguarded I had to look away. Y didn't smile. She rested one hand on the black glass, and the black glass vibrated cat-like under her palm. After that, it got worse. Word travels where it shouldn't. Calls in the small hours for hems and bustles, and a seam pressed open and re-sewn on a wedding dress that didn't want to admit it had belonged to someone else's body. People asked for me by name when they had no reason to. Notes with Y's careful hand slid under my door when she hadn't sent them. I caught my own face in the wardrobe mirror at odd times, slightly off from me, as if my reflection had arrived late to a conversation and was trying to catch up. The city's thrift stores ran dry of mirrors. Craigslist filled with pleas, looking for full-length moving sale, good condition, no replies. The club changed its name on the awning every week, and the doorman changed his hat. Inside, the black glass grew heavier. The frames warped like wood under pressure. "Why me?" I asked Y, one night when I'd put my hands into too many strangers' waistbands without permission and needed to test if I could still hear my own questions. "Because you don't open," she said. "At the door, in the glass, wherever you first learned the word no." "Who's calling?" I asked. "The city," she said, "or what used to be under it, or us when we're hungry for the wrong time." The last thing happened on a Thursday just shy of dawn. My phone alarm had the small, exhausted sound it gets after a week of nights. The wardrobe mirror ticked under its sheet. Someone knocked on my door, not polite, exact. I put 2 fingers against the wood below the peephole and felt no pressure. I looked at the hall, empty. "Taylor," a voice said softly. Not Wise, not the boys, not my exes, not anyone who'd ever paid me money. My name, but handled like silk. "I need you." I went cold in the way you do when your body decides the blood has better use elsewhere. "No appointments," I said kindly. Kindness buys time. "Leave a note. It's an emergency." The voice had patience. "The seam split." "Where?" "In the mirror," the voice said, and the wardrobe glass ticked loud and small, like a fingernail on a bottle. I lifted the sheet. My reflection looked back, tired, competent, someone who never takes off her thimble even when she sleeps. Behind my left shoulder, a second room, not mine, taller, older, the kind of plaster you only see in photos of apartments that don't go on the market. A woman stood there, pale dress, no seams, hair pinned at the nape in a way that would force your neck to behave. She held herself like a person who had always been the person other people came to, saying emergency and then waited for orders. The seam, she said, and her mouth hardly moved. It's in the back, I can't reach. I don't do house calls across, I began, and realized how broken a sentence can be. I'm not asking you to come through, she said. I'm asking you to stitch what you can see. There's a stitch, if you sew long enough, that you can do blind. You feel the edge with your ring finger through cloth and make 2 turns, and the thread holds like a promise. I threaded my smallest needle and put my hand flat to the glass. Cool. Y had taught me the trick of pressure. I pressed. The glass hummed. The other room's light sharpened. The seam at the back of the woman's dress gaped. Not fabric, something more like shadow. Through it you could see nothing. Not skin, not more dress, an absence that moved like breath. You shouldn't be held by that, I said before I could decide on carelessness or care. No one should, she said. I set the needle to the glass. It met resistance and then slid, as if I had pushed it through a thin sheet of ice. The thread followed reluctantly, skeptical, then obedient. I used the blind stitch in the rhythm of my grandmother's cigarette smoke, in the memory of a boy's grateful eyes, in the shape of Y's hand pressing black glass to cat's purr. The seam drew closed, grudging but honest. On the last pass, the wardrobe mirror shook once, the way a person shakes when they have decided to stop asking if they are alive and accept it. Done, I said, breathless and ashamed that I was. The woman turned. Her mouth did not smile. Her eyes did, a blank humor like winter light on a frozen river. Send Y my regards, she said, which I did not like. And you? What? Move the mirror, she said, before night. Where? Against an inside wall, she said patiently, as if speaking to a child, so that when the day comes looking in glass, it hits drywall and remembers itself. The wardrobe mirror ticked again. Once, sharply, in the glass behind my reflection, the seam held. The other room's plaster shed a little dust. The woman lifted a hand, and the lights in my apartment flickered because the building is too old not to eavesdrop. Then the other room dimmed. The glass showed only me and the sheet in my other hand. I lean the mirror against the inside wall now. I keep it covered except when I need to ask whether my face belongs to me. Nocturne changes its name and stays open. Ye sends notes and sometimes doesn't. And sometimes I carry a mirror down one flight while the stair rails varnish, whispers old sap stories. The boy runs at night and brings me trousers that smell like rain. The thrift stores refill with picture frames and never mirrors. Sometimes people knock. I let some in. Not at midnight. Not when the mirror ticks. I do hems by feel and teach fingers the blind stitch and say no to doors that ask nicely. And when the city breathes onto the glass with the hunger of morning and asks if it can come in brighter than night ever is, the wardrobe mirror stays against the inside wall, stubborn as a good seam. I put my hand flat to its covered face until the ticking eases, and the room I live in, rented, narrow, real, remembers to reflect only what it can hold. Now on to the next story. The trouble didn't start when the hospital closed. It started when we pretended it was gone. Ashford sat on its hill like a red brick scab the town couldn't stop picking. 20 years of weather had gnawed the cornice, vines pulled at the lintels, windows gaped with black squares where glass used to be teeth. Still, the building kept its posture, chin up, listening. Teenagers dared each other through the front doors. Ghost hunter channels climbed the stairwells for clicks. We told each other the place was basically a ruin, which is something people say when they want a thing to stop having obligations. I'm a paramedic. Buildings that refuse to be finished are my workplace. You learn their moods the way you learn families. Which door sticks, which elevator lies, which hallway collects the fights. But a building isn't supposed to watch you back. You're not supposed to feel the light in a broken window tilt to follow you as you cross a parking lot. The first Ashford patient we got in the ER made it hard to keep performing indifference. He came barefoot through the automatic doors at 2 in the morning on a police escort, clothes torn, soles shredded by glass. He wasn't drunk. He wasn't high. He smelled like wet plaster and the inside of a pipe. He hugged his head as if he could make his skull one size smaller. "Don't let the windows see me," he told me when I knelt by the gurney. He wouldn't let me shine my light in his eyes. He flinched from the stainless panel on the cabinet. He turned the monitor screen away from himself with a frantic hand. "Cover them. Everything that can see you back." The attending ordered a sedative. Tamsin, the triage nurse, the one who keeps a spare banana in her pocket and hands me crackers when my blood sugar forgets to exist, stepped in with the syringe. The man looked straight at her and smiled with too many teeth for the rest of him. "They already marked you," he whispered. "It's too late. You looked." She flinched. He couldn't have known she'd gone to Ashford the week before with her boyfriend and 2 of his idiot friends to film some urbex, as if the word could make a century behave. I only knew because she'd laughed about graffiti, helped me written upside down, while we restocked oxygen. The sedative took him down. We tucked sheets over his cut feet and told the chart a polite lie. Agitated, likely intoxication. Observe. 2 days later, Tamsin's husband found her at dawn, sitting on the sofa with both hands in her lap, staring at the black TV. Her eyes were wide enough to sting. She didn't blink when he said her name. When he switched the TV on, she flinched so hard she bit her tongue and started to cry without making a sound. They admitted her to psych, EEG normal, MRI clean. The note in the chart said, catatonia, with a question mark, because charts like punctuation when certainty is expensive. The rumor in the break room said it out loud. Ashford followed her home. A week later, we hauled in a college kid who'd gone in with friends. They said he'd paused at the second-floor bathroom mirror as a joke, then wouldn't stop looking. By the time they dragged him out, his palms were bloody from trying to scrape his own cheeks, as if his face were something stuck on wrong. He sobbed in our rig so hard he couldn't breathe. I bagged him gently and murmured like you do to a panicked horse. He choked out. He smiled first. I tried not to. It made me. That should have been enough to keep me away. But paramedics are bad at believing other people's lessons. We need to touch the stove ourselves. It was my partner who pushed. Dan chews gum like it owes him money, keeps his boots polished for luck, and thinks superstition should be paid in mockery, not reverence. "Black mold," he said, when the third Ashford-adjacent call came in, and the plasma screens threw our faces back at us, a half-second slow. "Snaky whatever. Spores mess with your head." "You think mold makes mirrors lie?" I asked. "I think mold makes people sick. Sick people interpret the world with whatever stories they preloaded." He flicked his gum into the trash with the cheerful spite of a man who has been wrong often and hates to add to the count. "Off shift tomorrow. 30 minutes. N95s. We sniff and go. There are 1,000 places I won't follow a friend off duty. Bathrooms in bars. Living rooms with men who say they don't need help and keep their fists in their pockets." The hill. I meant to say no. Then I thought about Tamsin's wide eyes. I thought about the barefoot man's teeth. I said fine, and hated the part of me that can't leave a bandage unlifted. We parked by the rusted gate just before midnight. The moon looked like a peeled egg someone had held in a hand too long. Our flashlights cut cones through a smell like pennies and rain. The front door lay on its side like a tongue. We stepped over it. The lobby tile cracked under our boots. Graffiti shouted the vocabulary of 16. Help me kill her inside. A wonky pentagram layered until yesterday's jokes turned into a sediment of old fear. We swept the first corridor, patient room doors with narrow wired windows. Our lights stuttered our forms across the glass. Two tall shapes, masks on. I forced myself to keep my light on the floor because floors tell the truth about the day. See, Dan said, trying briskness. Mold and kids. Smell? I asked. We both sniffed like dogs. The air tasted metallic, a battery on a tongue, mold threaded through. Sure, but not the headline. Halfway down the hall, he stopped. Hold up. My body recognized his tone before my brain did. I felt the small muscle under my eye start its private idiot tick. He raised his light at the nearest door's wired window. Two figures stood in the reflection. Me and Dan, except my reflected face wasn't moving. Not the eyelids, not the throat. When I lifted my hand slow to prove something stupid to myself, the woman in the glass stayed very still and watched me with interest. Dan's reflection tilted its head like a dog hearing a new word. Dan had not moved. We backed up in even steps. The figures in the next two windows pressed their palms to the glass with a soft, thick thud. Our hands stayed where we'd put them. In the third window, my reflected mouth twitched up, small and private, at something no one had said. We took the stairwell door at a trot that didn't look like fleeing, because pride is a habit you can do in PPE. The stairwell breathed cold. Every landing had a wired glass window. Every window had a face pressed to it. Some of those faces were ours, multiplied and scaled wrong like a child's collage. Some belonged to people I knew and didn't. Tamsin, the barefoot man, a boy who died in July with a pit bull whining at the curb. Every face wore an expression slightly out of time. On the third landing, a mouth opened, as if to ask me to hold something. I did not stop. The basement door stuck and then took offense. We slipped through into air that tasted like burned sugar and batteries. Mirrors lined the walls, standing, leaning, stacked in a jittery circle like teeth. Some wore ornate frames with the silver gone to cloud at the edges. Some were cheap rectangles with the safety film bubbled. Some were wardrobe doors that remembered shoulders. They faced inward, angled to catch a center point. Something stood at that point. I wish I could tell you it looked like a man. It didn't. It looked like the part of a mirror that refuses to be glass. A tall, narrow disobedience. Faces skinned across it. A deck riffling. Mine, Dan's, Tamsin's, the barefoot man's, the college kid. The mouth of each face was wrong. When mine surfaced, she smiled too soon. The mirrors in the circle shivered delicately, a dog's ears at a whistle. The thing lifted an arm and pointed. Its arm didn't have joints. It simply bent. We ran. There are choices you get to congratulate yourself for later. This wasn't one. This was the body choosing self over pride, and I led it back up the stairs between windows that tried to be eyes, through the lobby, over the tongue of the door, into night with our lungs on fire. In the passenger mirror of the rig, Dan's reflection smiled when he didn't. In the driver's side mirror, the version of me there breathed easier than I did, like she'd already finished something important and wouldn't share. We didn't file a report. You can't write something wore my face and tested the grin in the same field where you enter transported without incident. We didn't tell the charge nurse, or the cops we like, or each other. Not really. We did what night people do, rearranged small habits and pretended that was control. I taped a rag over the microwave door at the station. I put gaffer's tape over the shiny logo on my watch. Dan stopped wearing mirrored sunglasses. He turned the bathroom mirror to face the wall, like he was disciplining a child. We learned to look down. For a week, the town let us get away with it. Then we got sent to a domestic 2 blocks from the hill. The woman met us on the sidewalk, hugging herself so tightly, her sternum might have hummed. "He won't stop smiling," she said. as if describing a small leak. He won't stop. Her husband stood in the kitchen with his back to us, facing the sliding glass door. His reflection in it, narrower, slicker, grinned at him. His jaw shook with the effort of not matching. I walked sideways so he had to look at me, not the glass. "Hey," I said, "that tone you learn for men who are losing to an enemy you can't tackle. Look at my nose, not past me, at me." He tried. He accidentally caught the stainless of the fridge. He smiled so hard I thought his lips would rip. We covered the door with a blanket on our way out. We got him to the rig without letting him glance in the rear window. We buckled him and breathed with him until his body remembered the trick, the way a drowned man remembers swimming. He calmed. My hands shook only afterward, when I had no more job to do. That night, because apparently I don't like myself, I drove past Ashford with the windows up and the radio off. Air from the hill tasted like pennies and old rain. The black windows shone like eyes that had learned not to blink. I parked at the bottom of the fence line and looked straight at the ground, and still somehow knew the front door lay on its side, with its hinges still trying to finish their last argument. Back home at 3, my bathroom sink turned on by itself to a thread. In the mirror above it, condensation bloomed, where a face would be if I stood there. Letters followed, traced by a finger from the other side. "Don't let the windows see me." The apostrophe was missing, like a small politeness left out in a hurry. I turned the tap off so slowly the mirror didn't think I was refusing. I hung a towel over it and slept badly on top of the covers. For 6 days we stayed polite, and the town walked past the hill with its eyes on its shoes. Then Dan texted me a photo of his bathroom mirror, papered over with brown packing tape. "Good," I replied, and meant it. He sent a second photo. The paper had puffed inward like something behind it had exhaled. He wrote, "Ha." I wrote back a list. "No joking. Keep lights off after midnight. Don't stand where screens can catch you." And he sent only, "K." He was late the next morning. He never texts when he's actually in trouble. He only texts jokes. I went to his building and knocked the rhythm that means, "Hey, it's me." He opened the door on the chain. He looked present and not. He asked, "Do I look weird?" Like a child asking if a lie shows. "You look like a man who needs coffee," I said. He smiled by accident. The brass of the door kept the smile like a smear. I unhooked the chain without asking and went straight to the bathroom. The paper bowed like a sail, then flattened. I peeled a corner. In the fog trapped under the tape, someone had drawn a tidy grin with 2 neat teeth. We worked. We didn't go back to the hill together. We told ourselves that was restraint, when it was really fatigue. Tamsin started to blink again. She kept a sheet over her TV. She avoided the black of her phone screen when it was idle. When I caught her reflection in the microwave, it waved before she did. She laughed once, the sound a person makes when a joke touches bone. Then I did the thing no one had asked for. I went back to Ashford alone. I brought a face shield, not for droplets, for glass. I wrapped my phone in gaffer's tape so it would be a brick and not a lake. I wore a watch with a scratched plastic crystal that refused to reflect. I kept my light on the floor, except when the stairs demanded respect. I talk to the building because I am the kind of person who talks to dogs, cars, and rooms. "Just me," I said, stepping over the door's tongue. "Small business." The stairwell windows were empty. That was worse somehow. The basement door yielded like a tooth you shouldn't have wiggled. Down there the circle remained, but with a gap in the far wall where mirrors had been. Someone had moved them. Where? Who sells old mirrors by the pound? Why did the thought of them standing in somebody's antique booth make my stomach go hard? The center held the tall wrongness. Faces slid across it like cards. I saw mine older by 30 years. Mouth careful, eyes practical. I saw Dan trying not to grin. I saw Tamsin, hair unbrushed, furious at being looked at. The thing rotated its faces with patience. It didn't move toward me. It didn't need to. Hey, I said, because if you're going to be foolish, be polite. You don't get them, you hear me? You don't get my people. The mirrors shivered. The thing tilted. Behind me, at the door, something at floor height dragged one not hand across the threshold. The glass nearest the door leaned in, as if to listen. I stepped around the circle, away from the center. I put both palms against the nearest mirror. The glass was cool, then cold, then warm, the way a hand finds your temperature and tries to keep it. I talked to it the way I talk to a patient's child. Your job is to give people back what the day takes. Haircuts, ties, lipstick, who we are when we have to leave the house. Not this, not doors. The mirror hummed, old TV hum, the kind I could hear as a kid even when my parents thought the set was off. The surface steadied. The woman in the glass matched my breath again, not ahead of me, not with a borrowed mouth. I moved to the next mirror. Palms, talk, third, fourth. The oval with the ornate frame was most stubborn. It kept trying to paste Dan's mouth on my face. I pressed until my wrists ached and told it the list of what my hands have fixed. A kid choking on a grape, a bleeding man lowered gently so his mother wouldn't hear him hit, a prom dress hemmed over a bathtub while someone cried into a towel because she wanted to look like herself and not the idea she'd bought. The oval warmed and yielded my face back to me. I didn't finish the circle. Holiness is above my pay grade, but I spoke to enough surfaces that the room changed shape. The pressure eased, the way a bar quiets when one voice starts a story everyone needs to hear. The thing in the center dragged my face up again and made it grin like it knew something final. I didn't let it keep the moment. I turned my back on it. Movies tell you never to do that. Movies were filmed by people who adore looking. I faced the circle instead. You know your job, I told the glass. Do that. If something tells you you're a door, make it say please. If it can't, be a wall. The shape by the door skittered out. The wrongness at the center hissed. A sound like air abandoning a room. I left before the building remembered my name. I won't pretend I cured anything. People still come in shaking from the hill. The town pulls dumped mirrors out of the ravine like fish and stacks them at the transfer station. Thrift stores have stopped pretending they ever get decent wardrobe doors. Tamsin keeps a sheet over her TV and a hand over the camera on her laptop, and when her reflection waves first, she waves back, small, as if humoring an anxious child. Dan took the paper off his mirror and texted me a picture of a blank tile wall, with the caption it blinked first. I've stopped lecturing my friends. I talk to surfaces instead. I cover the bathroom mirror after midnight. I keep the rig's side mirrors aimed at the ground, unless I'm merging, and when I must look, I say aloud, give me what I need, not what you want. The black of my phone screen shows only my thumbprint smears. If it ever shows my mouth when my mouth isn't doing anything, I put it face down. Some mornings I forget to uncover the mirror on my dresser before I leave for shift. I come home and the towel is slightly askew, lifted by a finger whip. I smooth it flat. The glass feels cool under the cotton, as if someone on the other side is learning manners. I tell it the names of the people who need it. Kids with bobby pins in their teeth, old men trying to tie a tie again after a funeral, a woman who wants to see whether her hands make her look like her mother's hands yet. I tell it they matter more than whatever the hill thinks it is owed. When night presses its mouth to the window and asks for a smile, I let it fog the glass. The fog outlines an oval. I don't trace it. I stand there with my hands open, and when the fog clears and the glass remembers the streetlight and the opposite brick and my face, I say good, because sometimes approval is the only prayer that does any work. If you ask me whether Ashford is haunted, I'll say it's habitual. The town looked at the hill for too long, and the hill learned to look back. Mirrors are obedient. They were happy to help. The trick isn't to destroy them, it's to give them better instructions. We still carry people out who can't stop smiling. We still cover sliding doors with blankets on our way past. We still breathe with men until their chests remember to lift by themselves. On a good night, you can watch someone glance at a black surface and then decide not to, and that tiny act of refusal feels like a hinge choosing to stay a hinge. On a bad night, I wake and the bathroom sink is running again, a slender thread like a vein. The towel over the mirror has slipped. In the corner of the damp glass, two careful teeth appear in a neat little grin. I wipe them away with the side of my hand and go back to bed. In the morning, the glass shows me as I am, sleep-creased, competent, uninteresting, alive. I run a thumb along the line of my jaw in the reflection, and the woman there matches me, on time without expectation. The window behind her shows the river and a cloud. No extra faces, no borrowed smiles. If the hill wants more than that, it can wait for another town to forget a building. We're busy. We have real people to look after. Now on to the next story. They called it the Gray Hollow Beast, though no one would admit to being the first to say it out loud. It lived, they said, where the ridge folded in on itself, and the wind forgot its route down in the bottom of the creek bed, where water pooled black and pines grew in a ring, like parishioners refusing to sit. If you stood at the edge of the trees at dusk, you could smell it, not rot exactly, but the thick iron sweetness that comes from a butcher block, wiped clean, but never clean enough. If you camped there, you woke with your boots moved 6 inches closer to the river and a paw print pressed into the mud where your face had been. Hunters sometimes came back with a story about a buck torn in a way no cat or coyote could manage. Teenagers came back with matching scars on their shoulders they said were from brambles. Some people didn't come back at all. It was a story I'd grown up with and a story I'd outgrown. Then my father died, and the ridge stopped being a place for legends and became a place where the world might stop talking for long enough that I could hear myself breathe. I walked out the day after the funeral with a pack and a canteen and the knife he used to take trout out of the river with kindness. The house was full of casseroles and advice. I wanted neither. The old men in town said, "Don't go down the hollow after dark." The old women in town didn't say anything at all, which meant they had opinions you weren't owed. My ex sent a text with a prayer hands emoji she would never use in person. I turned the phone off and stuck it at the bottom of my bag so its blank face wouldn't catch my eye and ask for promises. Past the last mailbox, the road turned to gravel, then to 2 ruts with grass in the middle. Pines leaned in like eavesdroppers. The hollow took sound the way quilts take heat. By the time the sun slipped behind the ridge and the cicadas started their idiot chorus, it felt like I was standing inside someone else's breath. I wasn't planning to sleep there. I wanted to stand in a dark that wasn't full of picture frames and sweaters that still held my father's shape, and then walk back with my head in one piece. Instead, I found a cabin where no map said a cabin should be. It sat down in the fold like a knot in a rope, boards gone silver, roof furry with moss, porch peeled down to splinters where feet used to learn the house's rhythm. No path, no chimney smoke, no signs of anybody except the lock on the front latch was new and bright as a coin. Someone had put money here. That was the first thing that scared me. The second was the symbol carved deep into the door, a circle made of short slash lines, jagged as if a child had tried to draw a sun from a memory that hurt. When I touched it with the tips of 2 fingers, it felt warmer than the wood around it, as if the day had sunk into it and decided to stay. The hollow went quiet between one heartbeat and the next. The cricket song cut off mid-word. The breeze that had been sorting needles through branches forgot to move. Even the creek behind me made a listening shape. I put the flat of my hand against the door and felt something like a hum, not electrical, not mechanical, the low, steady insistence you feel in your ribs when someone bigger than you is also in the room, That was when the first growl came, so deep I felt it before I heard it, not far off, not other side of the clearing, right where the trees start. I turned and saw eyes, pale gray, rimmed red, set in a head that could have been a dog's if a dog had been left in a room with knives and had learned everything it could from the shapes they made. The body that followed the eyes was wrong, long in the forearm, hunched in the shoulder, matted fur slick with whatever eats blood for breakfast. It moved like it had never forgotten how to walk on two legs and resented being made to remember four. Its gaze slid over me like a hand over a side of meat. There was nothing hungry in it. Hunger is honest. This was the patience of a butcher between customers. It came at me so fast my brain didn't have time to choose. My hand did. I yanked the latch. The door gave. I fell backward, slammed it behind me, and heard claws sketch the wood with the scream of enamel on plate. Inside smelled like iron filings and wet fur. The dark was the thick dark of a place that has been keeping a secret for a long time and has decided to go on keeping it in your presence. I got my light out with fingers that didn't want to obey and saw chains bolted into the walls at ankle height and wrist height and throat height, hooks in the rafters, a table with knives laid out in rows, blades honed down to hisses. On the table, a ledger-sized book open to a page with lines of careful handwriting that started precise and ended like someone writing in a moving car. The top of the page said, "I keep the circle." Below that, "The beast is not one. It is the many that can be one. It wears whoever meets its eyes too long. It speaks in voices that know what you love. It can be held by iron and intention, but not forever. If I fail, it takes me. If you are reading this, I have failed, or I am outside and busy failing. Lock the door. Do not answer if it uses a voice you know. Choose a knife that knows more than you. Sit in a corner where you can see both windows and pretend that makes you safe." I read it twice because the door shuddered twice, and the mind does what it can when it can't do anything useful. A claw found the latch through the gap where I'd not got it home, and rattled it like a man who refuses to admit he should go away. The wood groaned. The carved circle in the door seemed to warm under my palm. Then the scraping stopped. Silence went on long enough to start doing harm, and then a voice came through the wood. "Son, open up. It's me." My father's voice, with the last 3 months of cigarettes it had held, and the last 3 weeks of morphine it had pretended not to want. He'd been in the ground exactly a day. I'd probably still had dirt under my fingernails. "Please," he said, "you don't have to be afraid. It's a stupid old story. It's only me." I swallowed. I made my mouth into a straight line and tucked it in. I looked down at the page. Someone had underlined "Do not answer" and scrawled beneath it, "Even if you're polite." "You always were a hard one," the voice said in a different tone, amused, as if it had remembered a joke it could use later. Then it laughed. The laugh was what happens when you put two incompatible substances in a pan and stir hard foam and black and things that never belong together. I sat in the corner with a knife that had white scarring along its spine and a grip worn down by a hand that had been holding more than wood, and I did what the book told me to do. I did nothing for as long as I could. The thing outside circled the cabin until the sky paled. Its claws ticked on wood and dragged on stone. Its breathing proved the size of its lungs. Sometimes it wept like a drunk on a porch. Sometimes it said my name, the way my ex says it when she's telling a story about me that has a punchline. Sometimes nothing at all, which was the worst, because you can't hold yourself rigid against a laugh or a name indefinitely. You fail somewhere. You fall asleep in a corner and wake with your head listing against a wall and the knife still in your hand. When the gray behind the trees turned into real morning, it went quiet with the satisfaction of a worker putting his tools down. I waited. I counted to the number that used to get me as a child, from here to the end of the block, back when I believed in bargains made with telephone poles and cracks. I got up when the light through the dirty windows, went from soured milk to polite. I opened the door with the knife held stupidly because knives don't make a difference when a story has decided to be true. No tracks, no fur snagged on a splinter, no claw marks in the porch except the ones on the door. Those the night had deepened and neatened, little slashes that had been scratches now becoming part of that carved circle, their angles righted, their lengths matched, like a kid who can't stand an unfinished drawing. I should have left then. If I'd been the person I had been a year ago, I would have walked out of the hollow using the same steps I'd used to get in. Grief makes you forget what you know. The hollow makes you learn what you wish you didn't. I took 2 hours in daylight to try every direction. North, the ridge gave itself up to bracken and tiny white mushrooms, and loops back to the clearing. South, the creek got wider, and then narrower, and then the same, and then the same again. East ended in a stand of young pines with identical scars at exactly the same height, as if something had paced them once and decided to count. West was a rabbit path that stayed a rabbit path and got bored of being one and dumped me into the hollow again, where the cabin waited like a laundry basket you'd been pretending not to see. The book had another page. It looked like someone had come back from doing something that let their wrists return to their hands and had sat while the adrenaline decided if it would leave. Iron restrains, salt confuses, chalk remembers, but only if you choose to stay inside. Do not chase. Do not try to cut anything that wears a familiar mouth. Gateways in this place do not open to roads. They open to repetitions. The beast runs the spiral the way water runs the sink. Survive 3 nights, and the circle closes. It will go on. You may leave. If you survive, you will not leave unchanged. Keep your eyes. Keep your voice. If they call your name after, do not answer unless you can count your breaths while you do it. My father had taught me to count my breaths in other rooms, emergency rooms, courtrooms, living rooms where he was going to say something that would go wrong and needed me to keep my face soft. The words in the book felt exactly like the thing he would have said, except written by a person who had been fighting a wolf with a history degree. I took inventory. The cabin had a pump in the corner that brought up water like a throat brings up the last of a bad dream. A cupboard with 3 tins that had labels bleached down to nouns: beans, salt, matches, a nail keg with nails different enough to tell you a man had picked them up from more than one place. No bed, a single chair, the corner where I could see both windows. The second night the beast arrived before the light finished failing. Its shadow went past the window in a way that made the dirt on the glass stand up, as if dust could hum. In the lamplight its fur looked not brown or gray, but the color of old locks. Its back bristled where a back shouldn't. When it turned its head and looked in, the eyes were not lanterns, they were coins, cold and flat and expensive. It spoke in my voice, not through the door, inside my ear, as if there had always been a tunnel from the hollow back to the place behind my eyes. You don't have to make this hard, I told myself, using me on me the way you use a tool instead of a fist. Let it in. Wear me. Stop trying so hard to be the only thing keeping something in place. Teeth help. I pressed my palms to the table and felt the grain as if it were a relief map of a country that had survived both kinds of war, guns and old grudges. The knives on the table vibrated, not from any wind. My reflection in the dark window grinned when I didn't. I had nothing to fight with except choosing to sit, so I chose to sit. The beast tried new tones. It tried my ex, soft, saying the thing you want people to say when you've lost someone and they are tired of saying sorry. It tried Tamsin, laughing like a friend. It tried my boss, angry. It tried the old woman who ran the bait shop and had never said 3 words to me. The circle on the door warmed under my hand. Somewhere outside, something small startled and ran in a shape that a fox would have liked to follow. Toward morning it went quiet. I slept the way people do in chairs when they're keeping vigil. 2 minutes, a minute. The space between breaths you can hold if you're not trying to impress anyone. The third day, I stayed inside. The book said you could go out, and the trees would bring you back. It didn't say you couldn't leave yourself in little pieces along the way, like breadcrumbs, and come back emptier each time. I ate beans cold and drank pump water that tasted like pennies and iron and counted to numbers I hadn't used since catechism. The third night it howled. The first 2 nights it had been gracelessly hungry. This time it announced. The sound went up the ridge and came back wrong, as if the hollow were a bell with a crack in it. The chain on the wall pulled tight, though nothing had gone into it. The hooks overhead trembled with the confidence of old mistakes. Open, my father said through the door, gentle, the way he had when I was 10 and had locked myself in the bathroom and decided I could live there if I had to. Son, please. The latch leaned. The door swelled. The carved circle deepened a shade darker, as if blood had chosen to move where it was most useful. I slid down the wood with my spine and put my shoulders into it and felt the bulk on the other side, press back the way oceans press. The book on the table had a last page I'd ignored because it felt like a man talking to himself, and now it felt like a man talking to me. If you have no silver, use names. If you have no names, use counting. If you cannot count, use pain. If you cannot feel pain, you have already opened the door. I put the point of the knife into the soft pad at the base of my thumb and shoved, not enough to maim, enough to make my ribs take a breath. My mouth had forgotten it could ask for. Blood came bright and annoyed. I smeared it across the carved circle without thinking, but with all the intention of a person who has run out of options and is willing to pretend that makes a plan. The latch popped. The door opened a finger's width. A claw came through, black, curved, jointed wrong. It hooked under the latch and tugged like a man tugging loose a nail that had always belonged to him. I brought the knife down on the circle because it was a target, and because I wanted something to happen, and because sometimes breaking a thing is the only way to stop having to carry it. The knife bit wood. Not deep, enough. The circle broke. Light poured out of the door, the way breath pours out of a man who finally admits he is tired. Not daylight, not fire, silver, so clean it made the dirt of the room ashamed. The claw jerked back with a sound that would have been a word if it had had the right mouth. My father screamed, and then I screamed, and then something with too many voices screamed us both, quiet. Then quiet for real, the kind where you can hear the spiders working in the rafters. I sat for a long time with my back against the busted circle and my eyes blurry with the from the inside of your head kind of tears. When I could stand without feeling like a stopped clock, I pushed the door with my foot. It swung on its new, wrong radius. The claw marks were gone. The circle was a black smear like a handprint, ash flaking as if an old poster had finally given up. Outside, the hollow looked like it always had. Needles, mud, a wash of gray. The air moved again. A bird insulted me from a branch. The creek remembered it had appointments downstream. When I stepped off the porch, the ground didn't try to persuade me to change my mind. The trail out wasn't a trail so much as the opposite of being lost. Trees that had been leaning in leaned back. The ridge lifted its shoulder and let me go. It was noon by the time the last of the pines gave me up to the dirt road and the power lines and the world that likes to have names on things. People said I'd been gone a day. People said I'd been gone 3. The old men clucked. The old women gave me a look that had a chair in it if I wanted to sit. My ex called from a number I didn't answer and left a voicemail that started with "hey" and ended with not quite a sob. Tamsin came by with soup she'd made and forgotten to salt, and stayed on the porch because she said her reflection in my front window was doing things she didn't approve of. I told her to bring salt next time, and a roll of tape and a nail. I put iron in the house, not superstitious iron, actual chain across the back door's bottom to make the fit true. Bar stock screwed into the kitchen table's underside so it would stop rocking and start holding. A pair of steel washers hung on red thread in the window that faces the river because washers were what I could afford, and red was what my grandmother would have used to tell a thing. No. I chalked a circle on the threshold and then swept it carefully away because the book had said chalk remembers, and I wanted it to remember the act, not the geometry. The hollow didn't let me leave without rent. I don't mean a scar I can show you or a sleep I stopped having. I mean that once a week or twice, when the wind comes down from the ridge carrying the smell of pennies and rain, something in it says my name exactly the way my father said it on the day he taught me to drive. Gentle, patient, ready to catch. I don't answer then. I fold a dish towel in half and in half again and place it over the bathroom mirror, not because of any old stories, but because glass is persuasive and I am tired. I count my breaths to 13, the number of trees across from the funeral home, the steps to the river from our old porch, the reasons I can think of in a hurry for not giving up what I worked so hard to keep. Once, walking past the feed store, I saw a man bending to tie his shoe in the window. The man in the glass looked up before he did and showed me a mouth that wasn't his. I took a promise out of my pocket and held it up between me and any more mischief. The glass went back to being a window with dust and thumbprints and blue sky. The man finished his knot and stood and thanked me for holding the door, though I hadn't. Twice now I've woken to the sound of water running, the sink on, a skinny thread. Both times there were words written on the fog of the mirror, where a face would be if I were brave enough to look. Come back. Both times I wiped them away with the heel of my hand and said aloud, no. Not loudly, not prayerfully, just like you say no to a dog that is about to learn a bad habit and will be better for not knowing it. When the moon is thin and mean the town locks its screens by accident, men sit on porches with their feet flat and their hands still. Women who have decided they'll never marry watch the edge of the trees and make soup that smells like saving. Kids who don't believe a word we say walk as far as the last mailbox and no farther, and we pretend not to see that a part of them believes more than is good for them. I know the cabin is still there. Sometimes I smell the iron of it under the moss. Sometimes I feel the shape of the carved circle in my palm when I pick up my keys. Sometimes, passing the ridge with the windows up, I catch a glint through trees that could be the face of a knife catching sun and could be nothing at all. I don't go back. I keep a nail and a length of red thread and the knife with the white scarring along its spine in the drawer by the stove. If guests ask what the iron washers in the window are for, I tell them they keep the glass from buzzing when trucks go by, and this is mostly true. If anyone says the gray hollow beast like they think it is a sound to bring to a fire pit, I get up and go make coffee and count to 13 while the kettle tries to be patient. On good nights, people, I love say my name and mean me. On bad nights, the hollow says it and means a door. On those nights, I say nothing, and the wind carries on down river. Disappointed, and the pine needles remember their manners, and whatever is looking for a familiar mouth goes to the next town that has almost forgotten one of its buildings and will learn again not to. Thank you for listening. If this story kept you company tonight, consider liking the video and subscribing for more myths, legends, and gentle hauntings. Sleep well, and may the trails you choose lead you safely home.